All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 11th business meeting of the Grosse Ile Township Board of Trustees. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, once again, welcome to everyone. We have the entire board present. We'll move on with the agenda. At this point, I'd like to ask for additions or deletions to tonight's agenda.
Yes, Mr. Supervisor.
Buddy.
I'd like to make somewhat of a change. I would ask that we take check number 67151 to Boat Hoist USA out of the consent agenda and move it down to action item number 2 for approval.
Second.
Okay, moved by, well, it's a consent agenda, so since he's asked to move it, we can move it.
It goes with that action item, so, I just move it down there for approval.
Does that mean we have to move the entire payables list? Or can we actually just take one item out? Yep, okay.
Done in the past.
Okay, that's not what we had agreed on previously, but we can make that happen. Any other additions or deletions to tonight's agenda? None offered. Those in favor of, those in favor of approving the agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None offered. It stands as amended. All right, with that, public comment limited to tonight's agenda items. With none offered, let's move on to the consent agenda. Mr. Treasurer.
Thank you, Brian. I'd like to have a motion to accept consent agenda 18-087, which includes the minutes of the February 11th, 2019 regular meeting, the check register dated through March 8th, 2019, with the exception of that item that's been removed, adoption of the 2019-2020 Township Board meeting schedule, and approval of fiscal year 2019-2020 staff holidays.
Support.
Okay, moved by the Treasurer, seconded by Trustee Budney. Those questions, comments from the board on tonight's consent agenda? Okay, with none offered, those in favor of approving the consent agenda as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None offered. Okay, the consent agenda is hereby adopted. Then let's move on to action items. Dust control, Mr. Budney.
Our annual dust control. Yes, I would like to make a motion based on the recommendation of the DPS Commission to award the dust control contract to D&D Emulsions, Inc. for dust control for the 2019 season at a rate of 58 cents per gallon applied.
Okay, moved by Trustee Buddy, second by the Treasurer. A lot like last year.
A lot like last year, the year before, the year before, the year before. It's the dust, D&D Emulsions has been holding their, actually this 58 cents a gallon is something that I believe the first year we had them, which was in the early 2000s, is the same price per gallon that they've held in all our contracts each year. One added thing this year, and the reason we wanted to go with them is they can accommodate us on the restricted weight requirements on the bridge. So with the good service we've had from them, and the people on the dirt roads seem to be happy with them, and the fact that they can make the weight restrictions, we being the DPS Commission decided to go with them and would ask the board to approve that.
Discussion among the board. We've done it every year. It's successful. I think we reviewed it a little more at length last year, the year before. It really does have a positive impact and makes the roads last longer.
Yeah, and I would add that, and I had brought it up myself to that maybe it's time to go out and look with the bridge weight restrictions and their ability to meet those. We thought it prudent for this year to just stay with them.
Any other comments from the board? None offered. Those in favor of, Based on the recommendation of the DPS Commission, those in favor of awarding dust control to contract to D&D Emulsions Incorporated for dust control for the 2019 season at the rate of 50 cents per gallon applied, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None offered. That will carry. All right. Fumbling for a minute, but we're going to...
Fumbling to get the, moving on to action item number 2, which is mine. Motion for the board to approve the past hiring of Campo Brothers and Boat Hoist USA, Inc. For work performed on the Groseal Lighthouse and for the payment to Boat Hoist USA, Inc. for the work, check number 67151, in the amount of $14,650.
Support.
Moved by Trustee Buddy, second by the treasurer. Discussion among the board?
Just a little history. Back in February, early February, around February 7th, actually, a board member got a call that there was ice flows racking up into our lighthouse. He, along with some other individuals, went out, looked at it, and clearly thought that there was a threat to the lighthouse. And so he employed Campo Brothers and Boat Hoist USA, Inc. to do some work to relieve that. The work was done because of those flows threatening the lighthouse structure. Although done with good intentions, a single board member does not have the authority to hire or pay a contractor on his own, and this motion is merely to get the approval of the board to make the action proper.
Okay, just as a, so I was the one who called in the cavalry to
and with I can't emphasize enough good intentions.
Well, let's walk that back a little bit. Yes, I made the decision. If something had to be done, I guess I could put it out there and say who would have voted against it, but I'm sure no hands will come up. But let me go into our P&P manual. The clerk authorized the payment, and it says, in our subsection F of 4.8, expenditure control, the clerk may authorize emergency expenditures when deemed essential due to imminent threat to health, safety, welfare of the township. So losing the 113-year-old irreplaceable tower, I thought was an emergency action. Did what I had to do because time was of the essence. I appreciate getting this legalized, but it was legal, and thanks for the support.
What date did the clerk make the approval? I'm sorry? On what date did you make the approval of that?
The date that Mr. Loftus called me.
And which date was that?
Mr. Malvesto, is this an inquisition?
No, it's just a question. It's a legitimate question. What date was that?
The day that he needed the check cut. I don't remember the exact date.
So that was not on the date of the occurrence.
All right, I'm going to stop this conversation right now. It's legally done. It's within my authority to do so. And P&P backs me up. Everybody on the board was
P&P
notified.
does not back you up.
Malvesto, I will
It
finish.
does not back you up, sir.
Well, I've got it right in front of me. Maybe you didn't hear what I just
After
read.
the fact, you got approval, but you did
All right.
not take so much time to call the board.
Mr. Nelson.
No, why does it seem like all the time we have to sit up here and listen to this? What did he do wrong? It drives
He did not.
me.
He simply did
drives
not
me crazy.
contact the board
So-
to ask for a consensus.
Did he have to?
Because we would probably have gone along with it.
Well,
Cannot pull the board on a text message.
better not be personal in nature, Tom. That's all I can say. In
Well,
some-
thank you for accusing me
Like
of
it
that,
is.
Jim. I appreciate that.
Brian, I'd like to call a question.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Question has been called. Those in favor of approving the check, which has already been approved, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None offered. Thank you. Now, on a lighter note, Mr. Bletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. It is with a great amount of pleasure and enthusiasm that I am asking Chief of Police Mark Warnick to come to the podium and introduce our new hire, John Canterbury, who is being offered to the board as the replacement officer for a vacancy we have. With John is his wife Stephanie tonight. I'd like to have both of them stand up and be acknowledged.
Carl, we probably should vote on it before we have this.
I get that. I just want them to see what they're getting.
I wasn't sure myself.
Steps ahead here,
I think it's fair for us to meet the candidate before we make the vote.
I think we should, Jim. Let's meet him before we vote on him.
That could go either way.
We have a second on that, Mr. Supervisor.
Second.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Budney.
so moved by Trustee Bletcher, second by Trustee Budney. Take it away, Chief. Who do you want to pick
I'll
up?
let Mark do the honors.
I'm here to get your approval to accept the hire date of March 18, 2019 for John C. Canterbury as police officer with Groceal Township. Patrolman Canterbury is a Downriver resident, graduated from Carlson High School, earned a BA at Indiana Tech in computer security investigations, and has 2 years of experience with the Detroit Police Department. Patrolman Canterbury will be an excellent addition to the Groceal Police Department. I can't say more than enough things, wonderful things about this man and his wonderful wife, Stephanie.
I would follow up by indicating that the police commission had interviews. We did a first round, narrowed it down to 3 candidates, and I will say that Officer Canterbury was the consensus, unanimous decision for everyone among management, among the commission. He just stands head and shoulders above the other candidates, not detracting anything from them, but every once in a while you have a candidate that comes in that just is rock solid. There was nothing in his background that would indicate we would ever have any problems, and there was a lot in his background to suggest that he is a kind, compassionate, firm, fair law enforcement officer who will do a great job for Groseal for the next 30 years. And I am hoping and asking the board unanimously endorse his hiring tonight.
I think there's a bit of a bloodline there, is there not?
His father was an officer in Gibraltar, as chief of police of Gibraltar also. Ray.
Great irony is I think your father was also one of the officers that had mentored one of the other candidates. So it is literally a small island, and it's even a small world in the police universe. So I would recommend, if there's any questions, but I would recommend his unanimous approval tonight.
I have one question for you. Why would you want to work for a small township like Groseal?
I want to work in a. Oh, sorry. Yeah, the ability to know everybody here and just have a community-based police force, be able to work with people and have a real relationship with those people is why I want to work in a small town. Thank you, ma'am.
Well, it was a pleasure. When I say that he was great to interview, when you have somebody that's done missionary work in the West and down in the Central America and does a great job, and everybody that we contacted with the background, and these guys do an extensive background check, says best thing you're ever going to do. So we have high expectations, Mr. Canterbury.
Thank you, sir.
And again, Ms. Canterbury, thank you for sharing them with us. Appreciate it.
Brian, I have one question for you.
Nelson.
These people that come forward that we hire don't look like they're old enough to. So I'm sure he's of legal age to work for us.
Jim, he is old enough to pull you over.
But he is, I think.
Jim, when they get to be our age, both baseball players and cops all look like our grandkids.
I was just going to ask you, did you grow up in Gibraltar?
Yes, sir. Grew up in Gibraltar.
Then that makes some sense. Another small town, you
Yes, sir.
get back to your roots.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's see, go back to the original motion. Those in favor of accepting approving the hire of officer candidate John C. Canterbury, with a higher date of March 18th, 2019, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You are now, well, once you get sworn in, you are no longer officer candidate.
Good morning.
Welcome aboard, both of you.
Tonight's action items are completed. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Well, as far as the business of elections, there's not a whole lot to report today. We are in the process of interviewing candidates for our opening in the clerk's office. But I have two other items that I finally get to bring up my liaison position, because I'm the liaison to the Planning Commission, and we don't meet that often, much like the ZBA. Maybe we meet a little more often. So we had a meeting on Monday night, and I'm just giving you, our active residents and our board, a little heads up about what went on at our meeting. So the first topic, and I'll try to do it justice, is obviously our township attorney, Mr. Assorti, has brought to our board's attention that with the successful voting of Proposal 1 and the legalization of recreational marijuana in the state of Michigan, that communities now have to make a decision to opt out of regulating or allowing space within their communities for recreational marijuana facilities. These are not, I think the word in this ordinance is establishments, and for medical marijuana, it's facilities. So the difference is with the medical marijuana, townships had to do nothing. You could opt in or do nothing. So in this case, though, doing nothing means you are opting in, and so we would have to opt out. It's not necessarily that this was a decision to be made by the Planning Commission, but our township attorney, our township manager, our supervisor, and our planning professional all believe that since the Planning Commission does a lot of zoning and ordinance work, that this would be a good place to start the discussion. And it was placed as a discussion item onto our agenda last Monday. And so there was no formal action item, and there was no action taken, except there was a very productive discussion, and there was a motion that was offered and passed that I will give to you at the end of my short summary. Basically, two reasons that this was something that we thought was important to talk about. It's that it's not a all of a sudden we're just going to say no. Grosse Ile voted on the subject just like everybody else did. Proposal 1 passed in the state of Michigan. Proposal 1 passed in Wayne County, and it failed in Grosse Ile by only 2.35% of the vote. And so we all tended to agree on the Planning Commission that we needed to take this subject seriously. We couldn't say flat out no, because we also need to make sure that we represent the minority point of view, which came very close to being an equal point of view. What came out of the conversation among the planning commissioners was that while very few of us would like to see a cafe or a use establishment on, say, Macomb Street or at one of our social areas, there are people, for instance, in the Commerce Park Committee or in the Airport Committee, or people who deal with more industrial applications, that don't want us to automatically shut the door on potentially having something here at the airport, like a packaging or production facility or something along those lines. The reason they're cautioning us to not do something is because starting in December, if you do not have an opt-out in place and a supplier or a company comes to you, you can't say flat out no, because you haven't passed anything. But at the same time, they didn't think we should have a knee-jerk reaction and just pass something for the sake of passing it. So what the commission voted to bring to the board is to recommend that the Township Board do adopt an ordinance to opt out under the Michigan Regulation and Taxation of Marijuana Act due to the fact that the state has not fully developed the regulation of the uses allowed under the act. At the same time, they don't want us to just opt out and forget about it. They would like the board perhaps to give them direction to come up with an ordinance that spells out our limits as both a board, a commission, and a community. So what they're asking us to do with this motion is to come back with them. They're willing to do the work to come up with not a blank template like we have, but actually come up with a ordinance that makes sense for the township. Find out what it means to opt out. Can you opt back in if you come up with a use or a facility that might actually work within your framework? So that's kind of how all that came about. Now, a number of people called me and said, how the heck did that get on your agenda? And it strictly was that our planning professional thought, let's start the conversation, and he put it on as a discussion item, and that's how we proceeded. And it was a very
But no, and yeah, well, and of course it wasn't presented that way at the meeting. It was presented that the board asked you to do this, and the board hadn't. But that's neither here nor there. But on the opt out, I got the impression from talking to Brian and reading that the idea of opting out at this time was so that to wait for the state to find out their rules and regulations so that you could craft what you talked about. Wouldn't it be premature to try and craft something now without knowing what the state was going to tell us had to be or couldn't be or whatever?
What they felt was we still don't know enough to even craft an opt-out ordinance at this stage. And because they don't know, and again, it may not come to the planning commission. We may farm this to our attorney. We may do it.
We've asked Tom to get something for us on that.
And that's why I thought it did come from the board, because you've brought it to us and we've talked about it, and we haven't really given any direction to make any movement. At the same time, they don't feel we know enough about opting back in if we wanted to just do a boilerplate opt out at this time. So if we're going to do it, we feel like we as a township, not the commission, just the township should know better what its options are, have more information about potential opting in or staying opted out. And a lot of other communities, I think 28 other communities have opted out, but again, without a real idea of what that means. And so we just figured it was important for us to study the issue a little bit further. But, yes, we agree that at this point, we should probably move toward opting out, but we don't know enough at this point to make.
And it's just something we should do sooner rather than later, so we're not caught at the end of the year when the applications can be.
Well, as Planning and Zoning News pointed out, if there is an application after December 2019 and you don't have an ordinance, then you are not going to be in good shape about. You're going to end up with a lawsuit.
It's going to be much more difficult for us.
End up in court. Now, I know the second topic that the Planning Commission talked about, and I'm just going to touch on it, is a potential rezoning at the West Shore Golf and Country Club, and that has now been discussed for quite a few months at the subcommittee level with the Planning Commission and the planner and the owners and the proposed owners and developers of the property, but it's not moving forward at this time. What they wanted me to express to people is that when it does move forward, there will be plenty of opportunities for public comment. There will be public hearings, and so this is not something that's just going to, happen and get shoved at people. So they want you to know they're doing their due diligence and are going to make sure that this works for the community. So that's my report from the Planning Commission.
We talked a little bit about, while we're on the we're on the subject of the recreational marijuana. We do have the template from Townships Association. I will be at Townships Association. There maybe somebody has crafted a better version. I'll bring back whatever I can. We, the manager, Mr. Bletcher, and I discussed prior to tonight's meeting, perhaps a joint study session, planning commission, and this board prior to our April 8th board meeting. So that would be the topic of that. So we want to have something sooner rather than later. So that would be the time to get us all on the same page. Yeah.
Hey, Brian, if I may, on that real quickly, the four groups that we'd be looking at would be the Police Commission, ZBA, Jim and I had that discussion, it's necessary. Planning Commission certainly would be very necessary with that. And we think that those are all in the Township Board as a group to have a study session. We're asking for a study session on April 8th at 6:30, I think would give us enough time so we can have an initial conversation. Ms. O'Connor has indicated that there's a lot of questions. I think those four groups are the ones minimally that need to be involved and know, and I'm hoping we could schedule that for April 8th at 6:30 if that works with Mr. Sorty's schedule.
Yes. So just to respond briefly to so everyone has an understanding of what I've done and what transpired is that what came out was after the law passed, there was some serious concerns, and you guys have already indicated that basically on December 20th, if those all go through, we've already now had a name change under the statute of the group, I'll use as a term, to review the applications and how they're going to be done. We have no rules yet about anything, how even the board or the analysis is going to be done with regard that they're doing. Based on my discussion with the township manager and my general understanding of where we've gone with the medical marijuana issue on the island is I drafted, I'll be honest, I took the Michigan Township Association ordinance and adapted it. And you all have gotten to know me well enough to know that I'm not a form guy. I don't like doing form stuff for a small community like ours. A lot of times the form stuff doesn't fit. But the thought was on this one is that if you go with what the Michigan Township Association is adopting, it's pretty much what the communities are or what everyone's adopting. We're all in it together type of thing, that if it does get challenged or something happens. The idea being opting out, that you want the opportunity to be able to say no, because if you don't have it in time and somebody does put the application in, and I'm not making any promises to you, but I'd be more than happy to wager a bet with any one of you that on that day, if we don't have an ordinance, we will have an application from someone for some type of facility or operation here on the island. So that's where we are, and that's what you have. I'll be happy to work with whoever and make whatever changes or modifications we do, but the thought was on this initial opt-out, until there are more rules and information from the state of Michigan, that we all stick together type of thing, and that way if there is a challenge, we're all in it together.
Certainly, if we meet in April, I mean, it's
Right.
the end of the year that we got to worry about, and not right up to the deadline. So we have time. Let's do it.
Oh, we have time.
Just make it clear to everybody. Was something we said on Monday night as well, and this is strictly about the regulation of the facilities and the establishments. This has absolutely no bearing on whether or not people are allowed to legally use or not use. This
That's
does
correct.
not regulate
That's
that.
not a local ordinance regarding the state law on their use, the number of plants you can have for your personal use within your home. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with commercial operations of that relative to non-medical marijuana. So
There are people who think that this will, circumvent that, and it doesn't. Yep.
correct. It does, opting out would not. Opting out just says to the state, if someone puts an application in to you, whatever board you have at that particular time, that we're still hoping to hear something on, if that board at the time says, well, we got an application for somebody that wants to do something at the airport at Grosse Ile, we don't have an opt-out ordinance from them, because there is a provision, and please don't forget, You talk about the time, right? So you have to pass the ordinance. It's got to be published. You got to go through the notification procedures. You also have to put the state on notice and the board on notice, the fact that you've got them, and make sure that they have it in place so that when they start to get those applications, that everything's on board. So
That's why
I know.
we need to do it now.
Two things, if I can add, Jim, to that point that you made. It is still a Class 1 violation of the federal law to do what the state voters have approved and what Colorado is doing. Where that takes us, I don't know, so I appreciate Mr. Assorti's methodical approach on that. The second thing is Kathy Walker, Mrs. Walker was kind enough to send me a copy of an article where a community north of us has already passed their ordinance, and they're working on it, and that's sure to be tested at some point on the Court of Appeals. So I think the idea that we're going moderately paced on this as opposed to leading the charge may ultimately save us a lot of time and grief and money. And when the licensing and regulation authority agency in Michigan gets involved, they're going to have some more things that are going to be coming up that we're all going to have to consider. So I look at the April date as a good place to start, but I don't see it as a end date. So we're going to be learning an awful lot about the medical and the recreational use of marijuana over the next couple of months. And I thank Mr. Assorti for bringing in not only his time and effort, but Tom's also promised a special guest speaker at that time, too, as I recall. So, thank you, sir, for that.
Yeah,
And it's not Tim O'Leary or Tim Leary either, so we should.
Ronald McDonald.
Philosophical question. Every member of this board took an oath to uphold the laws and the Constitution of the United States. How can we vote for any marijuana when it's against federal law?
We also have to uphold the state constitution.
But that wasn't delineated. It was included.
No, you're right. I
Right.
see the conflict.
Included. So how do we as board members?
Mr. Treasurer, I've learned I'm getting much better at this than when I started with you guys several years ago and over the course of time, and I know that I'm up here to answer legal questions, not philosophical
I
ones.
think it's a question that we
Very good, Tom.
we're going to.
I know. I think you guys all know me well enough. You know where I stand on the issue, and doing. We do the prosecutions, the few that we have on the island over there, and unfortunately, way too many of them involve. On the local level, involve marijuana, and certainly far more than probably many people in our community recognize.
Ethically and legally, it shouldn't even come in front of this board because we have to violate our oath to vote for it.
I think that goes beyond philosophy. I mean, that
Sounds like
sounds like
it's
a
it.
legal
Yeah.
answer. So
But
Wow.
that's something that
something to keep in mind.
I think that's something that the federal courts should be coming down on the state to get that sorted out. But everybody's stepping back, and we'll let you guys sort it out and pick off the strategy.
The thing that concerns me, and I think that most of the stuff that you read in the legal journals about what's happening in this, is that we're looking at time. We're looking at time now, talking about things today in March to make sure we have things done for December. Okay, the state of Michigan has a whole lot more things to do than we do to opt out to get it done. And from what my understanding is, some things are being done, but they're a long way from talking about, and I will, there are groups out there that have been very clear. They've got their application ready to go. And on that December 20th, it'll be out there in every community that has not adopted some sort of an ordinance opting out. It'll be in every community. The money's there to back it. They have all these options. One of the things that they've talked about is that if you use, you can't. We all know the story about, right? The people that are involved in these operations can't use the federal institutions and the banks. One of the things that they talked about the state is going to have to address is if those companies derive their profits from the sale or operation involving marijuana, how are they going to pay the fee for the license? So, I mean, that's just the very, very tip of the iceberg of where some of the things are going to go. Anyway, so you have. That's the reason I gave you the kind of the standardized Michigan Township Association form, was that if you are going to jump on board right now, it's kind of not too unlike what we did with the modification, the minors in possession charge. I think as a community of our size, we did the right thing. We laid low a little bit and let some of the other communities figure out what the expensive issues would be and go from there, so.
And I think as we move forward, I really appreciate you two putting together the idea for a study session, because as we can tell just from this conversation and the fact that it came to the PC, the Planning Commission, not the Police Commission, that communication is going to be key.
Yes.
You know, we're going to need to make sure we're all on the same page.
Let me throw one more. Nobody's running boat. Well, I did see people running boats through the ice, but these are all boundary waters around this island, enforced by Customs and Border Protection. And even though marijuana is legal in Ontario and it's legal in Michigan, it isn't legal to carry it in between. So if you think you're going to bring it on your boat anywhere in these boundary waters, you are subject to arrest under a federal crime. That's just plan on that. And I'm getting the look of disdain from Mr. Assorti, but again, that's Customs and Border is out of our.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No,
Basically,
that's
there's
out.
a whole lot of questions
Yeah,
out
there's-
there that
right.
aren't
There's one more
answered yet,
question.
and so
well,
you don't want to
that
rush
was
into
why I
this.
presented with the proposed ordinance to opt out. I'm not trying to steer anybody in any particular way. It seems like a long time, but
It was interesting that Brian Borden brought out at the Planning Commission that there were some of his cities or cities that he knows of or that he services who overwhelmingly approved the marijuana, and they still opted out simply because there's too many unanswered questions.
The only ones that I know of right now that have made clear that they will not opt out are the ones that have adopted some sort of ordinance relative to medical marijuana, and they're hoping to use the laws in conjunction with their ability to control medical marijuana. That's a whole, well, but those are the only ones that are out there in the forefront that are saying, no, we're not going to opt out. And, welcome to our town.
Right.
Tom? I just want to be clear. You made a statement that even though you have something, there is a time period that this has to be in place in order to meet, the posting
Correct.
requirement. So I guess my question to you is this: I'm going to use the term "drop dead." Is there what would be? I don't expect you to have the answer, but what is the drop dead date that this has got to be in place to meet all the posting requirements and that?
Let me work it backwards for you guys, and I'll send it to you. But you get with, right? Because we do have to publish. It's got to go through that period.
Because we would have to have something in place prior to December, whatever.
Right, exactly.
There's a period of time. So if you could just get back with us and let us know, that way
Yeah, sure.
we don't have we have an
understand.
accurate point to work towards.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Assorti. Madam Clerk?
That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Treasurer.
Thanks, Brian. For the month of January, excuse me. For the month of January, Township had a total of $15,888,000 and $3 invested in various accounts. These accounts had generated an interest of about $23,000. So far this year, we're looking at about $250,000 in interest, which is a whole lot better than it's ever been since, well, the first year I was here, it was much higher than that, but after that, everything went down the drain. So it's getting better. It's getting a lot better. And we're doing the investment policies that we have in place are basically to protect the money, so most of it is short-term. Even our long-term accounts we can only invest them in short-term vehicles. So all unpaid 2018 real property taxes are now considered delinquent and must be paid to the Wayne County Treasurer with further penalty. Payments to Wayne County can be paid online at Wayne County com/PTA. This site is current tax amounts are available with the following online payments. Other payment options include paying by mail, in person, downtown, or Wayne County kiosks, which are located at the Rite Aid on Telegraph and Taylor, and there's also a kiosk at their building downtown in Greektown. All delinquent personal property taxes for businesses are to be paid to Grosse Ile Township. Statements will be sent out by our office early in April to those businesses with delinquent personal property tax. The Treasurer's Office has begun to compile a tax roll to balance and settle for the 2018 rolls. As of March 1st, 2018, we've collected about 96.7, well, we've collected exactly 96.7% for the total of the 2018 taxes. All distributions have been made to the school in the county, and we have a Commerce Park meeting a week from Monday, and I have nothing further.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Treasurer. We'll move on to trustee liaison reports. Mr. Malvesto.
Mr. Supervisor, I have two questions. Number one, can you tell me if this meeting is being live fed, broadcast on television tonight?
I can't tell you.
You ask, please.
Who wants to get a hold of Mike and see if
He's walking in now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. And would it be possible to withhold my trustee report till the end?
I see. The end of what?
To the end of the trustee report.
Oh,
On a switch, you want to
Yeah,
drop
please.
down.
we can shuffle that around.
Thank you.
Then, does the board have any objections to that? Okay. With that, Mr. Nelson.
I have two quick things. One is the Festival Commission meeting for March will be March 20th at 7 o'clock, and the Recreation Commission meeting will be Thursday, March 28th at 6 o'clock. Did I say 7 o'clock for the commission? I should have said 7 o'clock for the Festival Commission and 6 o'clock for the Rec Commission this month in March. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Mr. Bletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I have the pleasure of sitting on the Police Commission, and the report that I have tonight is to advise that we are having a retirement of Barry Davis, who has left the force. He was with reserves for 13 years. Barry was just incredible person to work with. He had every tool that you would want in somebody that works with the public. Patience, firm, understood the law, and frankly was just one heck of a great volunteer. He's going to be sorely missed. He led by example and is going to be difficult to replace. We do have 10 reserves. We're accepting applications for those that are interested in working as a reserve. Please call 734-676-7100 and you'll be directed to the appropriate applications. We are continuing the coyote program. That remains in effect. We do have 74 coyotes that have been culled to date. Important reminder to everyone out there is that as of January 31 of this year, it is illegal to feed the deer in Michigan. If you're feeding, you're violating. If you're violating, you're not only subject to a ticket, but you're also doing a great disservice to the herd, because the purpose of that anti-feeding provision is to keep the disease that we've all heard about. It's been a difficult disease to arrest. Now we are looking at having violations for feeding because we don't want to have it spread by contact. And also invite everyone to look at the Grosse Ile website. Officer McLaughlin is managing that. If you see coyotes, you see problems out there with coyotes, please let us know so we know where to look for them. Additionally, officers have done the following. We received 31 complaints for animal control. We had a total of 133 warnings that were issued. There were 1,012 calls in totals for service, including 3 felony arrests, and our officers drove over 14,400 miles on Grosse Ile's 145 miles. That is my report for the Police Commission. I also sit on Open Space Greenways. We are going to be asking the board to appoint Dan Jaster as a replacement for Woody. Mr. Clark, he understands he's got a lot of work to do, and he's coming on with both feet. He's been an excellent volunteer for the rec department and proves to be, I think, a very satisfactory replacement, Woody. If you disagree in 6 months, let us know, all right? The next thing is that we do have the Nature Guide update is in progress. That's anticipated to be published in April. That will show where all the open space, greenways, conservancy land is on Grosse Ile. please take a chance, pick it up at Kroger or any of the other various offices on the island where you'll see it. It is worth looking at. Get out, stretch your legs, and walk. We are looking at the Manchester Trail, establishing a trail with the help of the Conservancy. Mr. Kantz has indicated he would like to be involved with that, and we're looking again for a placement of a trail where we don't have a lot of maintenance because part of the trail goes through water or other areas that make it difficult to maintain. And I will be reporting, sadly, tonight that Pat Nielsen, who has been on the Open Space Greenways Commission for over 9 years, has indicated that she needs to resign, and she'll be offering her resignation to this board. And it is with great regret that I have to report that. While I've only worked with her for a little over 2 years, she's been a terrific lady to work with. And for those of you that know her, she has just been a great volunteer and does a lot of hard work for us and is going to be greatly missed. But our thanks when that comes up next meeting. Finally, I was invited to attend the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission. I am pleased to report that BPAC has obtained a Southeastern Michigan Council of Government grant to buy wristbands and lights for our bicyclists and pedestrians. So they are working on a program with our officers that if you see them out there and officers have a wristband or some kind of a light that they can give to them to make them readily noticeable when they're on the bike paths and trails. Don't want to have somebody get clocked at 20 miles an hour while they're out walking by a bike that is being used at night. There is also an effort going forward to promote bike safety with 3 Saturdays of seminars. Children 10 and older do not require a parent. Children less than 10, we're asking that parents come so that they can be involved in that. I'll have more news for that at our next meeting after BPAC meets again later in March. And that concludes my report.
I have a question for you apropos feeding the deer. So, if you do everything you can to keep that bird feeder away from the deer at night, and they still come and empty out your bird feeder every night, are you feeding the deer?
I think if you know that you are contributing to a nuisance, and there are deer feeders and there are bird feeders, and bird feeders can be deer-proof. And I would ask Chief Warnick if we could pay special attention to Miss O'Connor's home in light of that question.
Starting
tonight?
My husband made a video. There is a small group of deer that consistently come to our backyard. We're on Island Boulevard in that area. There's quite a little herd there. And she is teaching her young ones how to, with her tongue, get into the little tight, because this is one of those feeders that goes down for the heavier birds, because we're only feeding the light little songbird. It's crazy, and my husband's like raising it, and he's doing this and he's doing that, and every day it's empty again. So, we got to figure out something new. I was really just kidding. But.
Mr. Assorti, it sounds like an admission against interest to me, and we could prosecute her. What do you think?
Yeah.
That'll teach me to be helpful.
Yeah. I can make it even easier for them. Just stop by about 11:30 every night at my house, and the same thing with the bird feeders being emptied out. Yeah, they are.
Okay, let's see. Mr. Budney.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. A few things. Tomorrow, DPS meeting here in the boardroom at 7 o'clock. A couple items on the that we're going to be discussing. The annual Suez contract adjustment. It's part of the contract. We do it every year, and we'll be talking about that tomorrow. Along with a new Wayne County local partnering agreement, which is basically Wayne County offers us money. If we put up some money, we get more money and can do something with the roads. So that's tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Surprisingly, I guess we had the ZBA meeting last month, and evidently it went so well. We have another one this month, and we have 2 appeals this month. So we must have done something right. So that's at the end of the month. It'll be on Tuesday, March 26th at 7 o'clock. at 6 o'clock, I should say. We changed our time at 6 o'clock in the boardroom. And our next Q&A session with the residents of Grosse Ile. We had that last month for the first time. We had around 24 people show up and stay for the whole time. It is a question and answer. It is not a discussion. It is not a debate. It is merely a chance for the residents to ask their questions and get an answer. I believe we had about 6 questions that we couldn't answer at the meeting, and to my knowledge, I believe all but one is, we've gotten hold of the individual, and all but one has been answered. So first time around went really well. Our next session will be Wednesday, March 27th at 6 o'clock here in the boardroom. And lastly, there was an item in the Grosse Ile Grand that just came out. I got the paper on Saturday. I read the article today, and it concerns me. And all I would like right now is I would ask everyone on the board to please read that and have a discussion on it, some action on it at our next meeting. But I want everybody to read it and see possibly maybe my concerns aren't the majority's concerns. But I read it and I have some real concerns with the position that the township is being put in.
Which article?
It is
articles.
Well, yeah, it was the article that was written by a board member. How's that? I don't. Well,
Only 7 of us.
I know, and I don't. And the point being, I don't want to make this personal. This is not personal, but there's a concern. Read the article. If you have a concern with it, fine. If you don't,
Well, I read it. It's my name on the article.
it is okay. Fine. You've brought it up. Yes, it is. And all I'm saying is, please read it. And next meeting, I'd like to discuss.
Something tells me it's going to be discussed long before next meeting, Jim. Probably.
Well, it
within the
probably
next
will.
hour.
Okay. I'm slow tonight. But that's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking is everybody, because I don't want to have a discussion and people not being familiar with it. That's all. And and you took care of my questions on opting out. So at that point, I have nothing else.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buddy. Mr. Malvesto.
All right. I don't want to especially say on a brighter note, but with the fire department, to date, we have 112 rescues and 28 fire calls. As always, the boys are busy. Because I am actively involved with and volunteer with the Sacred Heart Church Knights of Columbus, this past Friday was the first Lenten fish dinner that they put on. 591 meals were served in 3.5 hours. That was a record for us. I can tell you that the volunteers were beat up, exhausted, sore, tired, really wrung out by the end of the night. 3.5 hours, 591 dinners served. And that didn't include whatever food was left, serving the 30 or so volunteers afterwards. So it was a pretty big night. Bunch of great people doing a lot of hard work. On the other hand, I do have something to say. I read the article as well, and I was disturbed by it as well. I don't care if every letter in that article was 100% accurate. It did not need to be put out at this time. So what I've done is I've got a letter of apology here that I'm going to read to you. I apologize for reading it, but this is my apology to Grosse Ile and the people that are involved with this. So again, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to read this. So because a recent article is written in 2 local area publications in regards to the current conflict surrounding the Groseal Animal Shelter, I'd like to clarify my stand on the issues that are at hand. I want to make an apology this evening to the 5 women who approached this board at a previous meeting and expressed their feelings, and then they were chastised at the following meeting by a member of this board for simply expressing their thoughts. It was their right, under public comment, to express what they felt. I also want to apologize to the 2 women who were the victims of unsubstantiated hate mail, and and to the residents of Groseal as well for what has ensued since that time. I want to give you some background. The 5 women I speak of are volunteers for Tails and came forward, as I stated, during a board meeting under public comment and expressed what they felt they had endured. It was their right. Then the following meeting, our supervisor chastised them, as our chief elected official characterized them as giving vicious, orchestrated, and false statements in regards to the ACO. Instead of just sucking it up and letting it go, letting the fire burn out, we chose to chastise them in public. Supervisor Loftus has since written an article that was published this past weekend. It was from the supervisor. Remember, the supervisor is 1 vote, just like myself. But from the supervisor, it makes it appear that this was the opinion of this township and its board. And it was not. It was his. I had a difficult time accepting this, and what I'm questioning is the timing of these articles and the tones of the articles that were published. So I'm going to respond myself. We as elected representatives of the Township of Groseal should be above taking public comments as personal. Obviously, Supervisor Loftus doesn't feel that way. So I'm going to give you my side of the story as I viewed it and come to understand it. Why have we come to where we are? Well, approximately 2 years ago, a letter was mailed out, specifically targeting the people whose name were on the Tails membership mailing list. The mailing list was used without the knowledge or consent of Tails, and there were unsubstantiated allegations made, and 2 members of the Tails board were named as being involved in questionable activities. The letter was sent from an anonymous source, a concerned citizen. My personal feelings are any unsubstantiated anonymous claim should be looked at with, well, I'm not going to call it a lie. The author of the letter was later identified as the Township ACO. If that wasn't bad enough, Supervisor Loftus, in an email to the board, endorsed the statements. When his letter became public, the 2 women that were named in the ACO's letter felt that they had been defamed by her allegations and, through their attorney, requested a retraction and an apology for the statements. Now, this is important. They were made by both the anonymous, these statements were made by and endorsed by the anonymous author and Mr. Loftus. Over a month passed from the date of the retraction request, and when a response was not forthcoming, the 2 ladies filed a defamation lawsuit. This lawsuit was not filed, and I repeat, it was not filed against the Township of Groseal. It was filed against the two individuals, Cordes and Loftus. And to be clear, the lawsuit was not filed by the Tails organization. This is important. It was filed by 2 individuals against 2 individuals. Once a lawsuit was filed, it appears that the township supervisor took it upon himself, without any discussion or input from this board, the board being 7 people, to engage the township's insurance carrier to defend himself and Cordes from the charges stated in the complaint. Now, if you wonder why the Tails organization and their volunteers feel as they do, let's just go back to last year's Island Fest. What some of you may not know is the Tails organization was denied participation in the festival. I want to be very clear. It was not the Recreation Department. It was not the director. It was not the Island Fest Commission. They received a letter sent from the township manager, Mr. Riem, stating that they would not be allowed to participate. It's important to keep in mind Tails never was involved in a lawsuit with this township. Yeah, there was pushback. There was never any discussion as to Tails filing a discrimination lawsuit against the island. 1 week prior to the festival, Tails was sent a letter stating they could participate, but with specific demands and restrictions attached. With such short notice, Tails decided not to participate. It was a tremendous loss to both Tails and the festival itself. The Island Fest played a major role in Tails' annual fundraising endeavors. Something else to keep in mind is Tails is an organization that was chartered over 20 years ago as a 501c3 organization to support and benefit animals. For the most part, in cooperation with and with oversight by the police department, Chief Porcerelli at the time, the Tails organization and their volunteers unselfishly gave their time and love to care for abandoned and injured animals. For over 20 years, Tails watched over the animal shelter without any problems. So why now is there a problem? Through Tails' extensive and tireless fundraising endeavors, which were supported by all of your contributions, they were able to contribute between $20,000 and $25,000 annually to support your animal shelter. Simple math tells you, over that period of time, as much as $500,000 was donated. I don't have the books, but I'm doing simple math. It was to provide for the animals and keep the animal shelter operating. So where's that money going to come from now? In the past, the Grozio Police Department has budgeted $10,000 annually for the operation of that facility. Currently, this year, we've had to allocate another $5,000 for that. From the very beginning, Tails' intention was to see to it that animals were not just cruelly put down. Their goal was to see that the animals would be rehabilitated, re-socialized, and that these abandoned animals were to be adopted and integrated into new and loving homes. Recently, after approximately 2 years in court, the women could no longer afford to continue with the lawsuit and requested that it be pulled back. Yes, the judge dismissed it with prejudice. He had no other choice. The ladies pulled back their lawsuit. I'm not sure if the rest of you are aware, but during the process of this lawsuit, there was a panel. 3 attorneys were assigned to look at this job. You can call them mediators, arbitrators, problem solvers, call them what you will. But at the time, they found that the ladies should be compensated in regards to their lawsuit. They accepted it. The township denied it. I don't understand why. So what happened? Township prevailed. We bullied them into submission. We forced them to drain your bank accounts. Yeah, they had a choice. But this was the outcome. There are no winners in this. There's only losers. I ask you why. Was it all about somebody's ego? I mean, why would we continue on with this? These are residents. These are citizens. These are volunteers. You're going to be told that this lawsuit didn't cost the township a dime, that it was covered by our insurance carrier. Well, you wait and see what our next insurance premium is going to be when it rolls around. It will reflect these costs. So aren't we proud of ourselves? By simply sucking it up, apologizing, printing out a retraction, this could have been over and done with. Over a cup of coffee and a handshake. But aren't we proud of ourselves? We prevailed. What I'm really curious about, is what this whole thing really amounts to. It couldn't be that there's any financial gain to be had. Or then again, is there? Grozio is a small community where our residents pride themselves in their homes, where family values are their first priority, and they show their dedication to their township, their community, by participation. These are volunteers. So where's this going to leave us now? Who's going to take on these future commitments? Or it's going to be something like, you know what? If I disagree, am I going to be bullied? Am I going to risk this type of action against me? How many service organizations are going to risk stepping out, and taking something like this up at this point? Remember, this board, your elected officials, turned a blind eye to this lawsuit and allowed it to continue. We could have and should have stopped it by demanding that Supervisor Loftus simply pull the plug. Remember, Supervisor Loftus is 1 vote in a body of 7. His authority doesn't extend beyond his 1 vote. We chose not to do this. So ask yourself, as individuals, would you have allowed this type of bullying to continue, or would you have put a stop to it if you had the ability to? The board works for you, each and every one of you. It's not just for our friends. So what I'm asking you tonight is what best symbolizes your community? What best symbolizes your community? Is it the historic lighthouse that we rushed to save when it was threatened by ice? Or is it some hideous piece of illuminated trash that greets us when we cross the county bridge onto this island? Our island. Think about the symbolism of this. A lighthouse that stood the test of time for over 100 years, whose beacon welcomed people to a safe harbor. Or how about the two bridges that span the Detroit River, that connect us and unites our community with other communities? Compare that to a cheap dime store trinket. When its batteries burn out, we toss it out with the morning trash. Just think about that symbolism. I'd prefer the lighthouse. So tonight, for myself, to the 5 ladies who addressed this board, I apologize to you. You were exposed to ridicule, embarrassment by this board. It was allowed to take place. To the 2 women who had a choice, they certainly had a choice, but we bullied them into submission. All they wanted was an apology, a retraction. As simple as that. And to you, the residents of Grosse Ile, we let you down. We're embarrassing you. Publicly, in the news, on social media, it's an embarrassment. I've lived here since 1951. That's 68 years if you do the math. What has recently taken place is an embarrassment. I'm ashamed. What's done is done. We can't change that now. But you can. We can. We can see to it that this type of thing never happens again. Mr. Supervisor, that's my trustee's report for tonight. Thank you.
Offered a settlement offer. You just need, you can have your own opinion, you can't have your own facts. The facts are the court documents. It was unnecessary because they brought the suit, not us.
I submit these to anybody who would like to see them. This is from the courts, talking about that
is not a settlement offer. That is the case evaluation.
It's an evaluation. Yes, it is. It was accepted by the plaintiff, by the 2 ladies. It was turned down by the township.
It was never brought to the township.
No, there's a lot of things have not been brought to this township. There was in the original letter, it says they finally had to admit when documentation was provided showing they contributed to the Monroe County Animal Shelter 5 different times in 2016, totaling roughly $1,500. This was done with other board members' knowledge. How about this picture? Here's a picture of ACO Fortis with a trunk full of dog food at the Monroe Animal Shelter.
And she told, with that battle drive, she told people, this is a collection for the Monroe Animal Shelter. You can't go in with half the knowledge.
You can't
have to know what you're talking
you can't do one thing and then turn it down on somebody else. You know what you can
This discussion
is not ended. It is not ended. It's going to continue because you continually bring it up within social media and in the newspapers. When you let it die, it will die. Until then, it's going to continue on. Please let it die.
It's over as far as I'm concerned. Well, it's not quite over.
No.
There are still some state laws that have been violated that we need to correct.
That Grosse Ile has no authority over. If there are state laws that were violated, it's up to the Michigan State Police, the state of Michigan, the IRS, or whomever to bring those charges. It is not this board. It is not this township.
Prosecutor of that, but that's not your decision to make.
It's neither yours either. You are one of 7 votes. That is all.
Well, brilliant. Read the court documents. Read the court documents.
I'd like to if they would be made available to me, because none of this information has ever been made available to the board.
Well, now we know why, too.
Yeah, we do know why. It's because
I will glad we have all the is that can be shared now? It was underprivileged, but
What was underprivileged?
The stuff I got said attorney-client privilege.
What are you talking about?
Is it releasable?
I'm not sure what court documents we're talking about. We're throwing a lot of terms around here that, quite honestly, by all members, that I just suggest to all the board members that we take a step back, because we're throwing around some terms that maybe aren't necessarily accurate all the way around. So, in legal terms only, but whatever documents I have, and I can certainly get them from our insurance counsel. I know other board members that asked for them, and I provided to them. I thought that I had provided all of you via email the opportunity to ask for them. I know some of you already did, and if you'd like them, Mr. Memez would just ask.
This was not provided by you or the township.
The what?
These two documents right
The
here.
the case evaluation award.
Evaluation, right?
Well, I'll be happy to pull the email where I sent it to the board.
I'm just saying that these documents did not come through a township email.
Where did you get them, Tom?
Is this an inquisition?
It feels like it. Where did you get, you're throwing a document out there, so we have no idea where, you might have made that up yourself. We have no idea where that came from.
I would expect that from you, Supervisor. I would expect that from you.
All right, that's it, Tom.
Do you want to? You can move on. I'm up for the attorney's report. Do you want to save me the trip?
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
You want to save me the trip of walking back up here, because I do have one thing to say for the attorney's report. Okay, all right.
But just reiterate for the record, you shared as much information as you possibly could with the board. We weren't duped in any of this.
As far as I know,
Accused that we were duped, and I don't feel like we were duped.
This board was never made aware of what took place in getting us involved in this lawsuit. It was not a board action. It was the action
right.
of one person.
I'm going to poll the board. How many board members were kept apprised of the progress of this? Mr. Bletcher?
I was.
Mr. Nelson?
I was.
Madam Clerk? Supervised was Mr. Treasurer? Mr. Budney?
I felt to some extent, yes.
Mr. Malvesto?
We may have been updated. We were never approached in regards to the starting this lawsuit to begin with. That was your decision alone, to draw the township into this lawsuit. The board was never brought.
I can't tell people whether to sue me or not. I mean, I'd prefer they didn't, but
you were being sued. The township wasn't. You drew the township
well,
into it.
I think our insurance carrier felt differently, because they took the case and did not leave, as you would have had myself and Ms. Cordes hang out to dry. The end result would have been the same, though. The courts ruled in our favor.
Show me that ruling, please. Make that ruling available to me. Make it available to the public, in fact.
Sure. I mean,
the entire board has the order of dismissal from the court.
Copy of that.
I have a copy. Mr. Bletcher, do you have a copy of the order of dismissal?
I do. It was voluntarily dismissed by the plaintiffs with prejudice.
Yeah, okay. With that kind of behind us,
Attorney
but
report, yeah.
this part of it behind us, Mr. Assorti.
So I don't know. I didn't want to mislead anybody about the timing of things. And so there was a question about the ordinance and adoption period and time period that was involved in just
Back to medical marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana.
any ordinance that we impose, right? So just so we're clear, it is 30 days if we impose a sanction. If our ordinance that we adopt imposes a sanction for holding it, we have to wait 30 days after publication for that ordinance to take effect. If we do not impose a sanction under that ordinance, then it takes immediately upon it takes effect immediately upon publication. So I don't want anybody to be confused time-wise. That's all. That's all I have.
That's it, Tom?
Okay, moving on. You were next. Township Manager, Mr. Riem.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. A few brief items report to the board and the community. Remind the board any budget comments to pass those on to Mr. Supervisor and Finance Director. And at the next board meeting scheduled for March 25th, there'll be a budget presentation hearing, and we'll be asking for adoption for the upcoming fiscal year. And from the standpoint of being one deep succession planning, the clerk mentioned it earlier. I believe Trustee Budney did as well. I want to update the board on where we are with the DPS director candidates position. We currently are reviewing those candidates. We have a meeting scheduled this week with Trustee Budney, Treasurer Van Oss, Chairman Kostick, and myself to review our schedules, come up with a timeline for interviews and when we will possibly be bringing them to the board. And we also have, as the clerk had stated, gone through the review of candidates for the clerk's office election specialist position. And we'll be doing the final reviews, and it's our intention, hopefully, to have the candidate before the board at the next meeting of March 25th. We look forward to having that position filled and let the training begin. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Riem. Let's see. Supervisor. All right. Better news. Something most better. It's 2020 is coming upon us every 10 years. It's census, so census time is back. We had a meeting with a census rep, Ms. Gape and myself. And the census, again, starts with me, and we set up committees, and we make sure, and their goal, they've changed the format a little bit, but their mantra is to count everyone once in the right place. So to facilitate that happening within the township, we're going to be establishing what they call the complete count committees, where we reach into community groups to ensure that we know where everybody is and we get a count of everyone. Most of it's done through the mail. Some of it is done in person, and we want to have the right people aboard to do that. There will be some hiring of part-time help in the census. More of that as I get more information from the Census Bureau. But that's coming up, and the finish date is the 1st of April of 2020. So at that point, all sorts of things happen. When they look at the numbers, they look at redistricting happens again. Michigan is probably going to lose one more member of the House because our population is not expanding like other states. But that's one of the things the census contributes to. That's coming up. We talked a little bit about the lighthouse, and moving into that on that same subject. After we got the thing stabilized and safe, shortly thereafter we were notified we were awarded the Michigan Lighthouse Assistance Program grant, $40,000 up to $40,000 reimbursed. The society has to have $60,000 though going into it. It's just the way the program works. We have to have the cash up front to get reimbursed for work we've already done. So the society's money goes out first, and then the state will reimburse up to $40,000. We still have the GoFundMe. I think Kristen has ratcheted back a little bit because we do have the grant dollars presumably available. But there's some nuances here. The grant is specifically for the exterior of the lighthouse. Because we don't have continuous public access or regular public access, only the outside is visible to the public, and the inside only one day a year. So we're guided to use the grant money for the exterior, which needs most of the work, but there's still a lot of interior work where we have had water incursions. Some of the 100 and some odd year old windows are not functioning properly. Things aren't true anymore. Doors need to be replaced. That is all going to come out of donations that we all make to the lighthouse. And we don't know the extent of the damage that the ice did to it when those slabs were leaning against. We didn't see anything, but none of us are experts. We're going to have the architect look at it and make sure it hasn't been displaced on the foundation. So that's going on. There's a lot of busy work. Anybody who's done with grants knows there's a lot of busy work that goes with it. We're starting on that, and I'll keep you advised as the progress goes on. We'll be taking bids, and we want to keep her on duty for another 100 years. Let's see. Not so good news that as you're aware, we've been petitioning the EPA to stay, and this will be a topic of an extended discussion, the EPA to stay here on Grosse Ile, or at least in the local area. because the biggest cleanup in the state of Michigan is happening right across our river. The biggest cleanup likely to happen in the state is right across the river, and they want to move our EPA, our on-scene coordinators, and EPA law enforcement to Ann Arbor. My argument, which is well understood within Michigan but means nothing to anybody in D.C., is if they have to respond from Ann Arbor on a game Saturday, they just aren't going to get here. We need them here. Mr. Kelly, who is I think he's the head of the on-scene coordinator, showed me the equipment that he has to have to respond. As you could imagine, some of the things they respond to involves respirators, hazmat gear, testing gear. All this stuff has to be secured. He can't take it home. He can't take it home in his car with him. So he will have to respond from Ann Arbor, where it's stored, to here, to McLouth, if they find something that needs to be addressed. It's just not good use. Plus, he has 1,000 feet of storage. He needs 1,000 feet of storage for his team, and he was told, "We're giving you 750. You'll learn to like it." That was his term, not mine. But it's just not a good use of. I don't think it's a good use of resources. It's not in the best interest of the local residents or the health and safety. So I'm still working on that. It's very frustrating when the letter of rejection shows that they didn't read our argument. Again, it's just frustrating. But I'm not done. Our next board meeting, as we said, we'll be adopting the budget and preparing to go into the next fiscal year. It'll be the 19 through 20 fiscal year. At that time, I still need some committee chairs. We approve all that at those meetings, and that'll get us on to the next fiscal year. I'm not going to make a retort to the Tails allegations. Again, the court documents speak for themselves, and I'm using the blanket term court document. That concludes my report. But I am going to exercise. We have a discussion item of the McLouth Steel Plant, and I think I have some ladies here who would like to speak about the Tails. I'd like to let them go first, and then, Mr. Buddington, because it was your ad, can we go in that sequence?
Yes,
Let them
just
do their public comment, and then we'll.
Absolutely.
Okay, this time I'll open up the public comment. If there's a comment other than the animal control issue, please, you're welcome to the microphone. If you want to hang around for the McLouth discussion, that'll come, sure. So comments? Oh, there, Mrs. Walker.
Kathy Walker, Thorpe Court. Well, next week we start our We Kayak again. I know you're excited. I know everybody's excited as well. You should be. Let me just show you what we've got going. It's going to be a party, and here it is. Yeah, there you go. It's called our Cabin Fever Party, and it's Tuesday night at 6 o'clock till 8. It's only 2 hours. There'll be pizza, there'll be pop, I'm making goodies, so there's always going to be a lot of food, and we're just going to talk about kayaking, and I hope everybody who's interested, thinking about it, has a brother who did it, a mother who did it, some kind of crap like that, comes, because it's going to be a nice time. This is our third time. We usually videotape it, and we put it on the We Kayak page, and then we do a open, like Gross Sale Live, and we get about 3,000 hits. So it's kind of nice. But it's a nice party, and I hope everybody will come. Everybody's welcome. It's free. And this is not about, my next part is, it's not about the animal control officer.
Kathy, let me just stop you quickly. Go back
Sure.
to the kayak. I'm just reading this. It's open, but you need a reservation.
Sure, call them. But you can come.
It says reservations requested.
It is, because they want to know how much food to get, because we want everybody to be full.
Okay.
And we got a lot of guys coming, so they like to eat, and so do the women. And there's a lot of food. It's just fun because you get a mix of, seasoned kayakers, newbies, people kind of curious, and it's not a sales pitch or anything. It's just to try to get them to get excited, because we start again Memorial Day to Labor Day. And again, it's a free thing, and we're really hoping this is our 7th season. And I know we're going to have a lot of people helping us to launch again, and that's great. But it's going to be a good time, and I hope everybody comes.
7 seasons, no casualties.
No, we had one go in the water, but we got him out. And now we have a lily pad that is always with me. And we are all about safety. I think everybody knows that. And we don't recommend anything when the water temperature is below 75. You know, we like it warm. So anyways, but and we're having a lot of interest in perhaps people donating to get, you know, our area even better than it's been. And you guys have done a great job. Tom, especially, you've been so helpful with it. It's just a great little special thing on Grosse Seal, and a lot of people haven't taken advantage of it yet, and I hope they do. Let's leave it at that. But my next part is, it's not about the ACO. It's not about even the animal shelter. It's about that article, because I was really disappointed. It was defensive. It was one-sided.
Why come back about and make a second public comment? I'll allow you to comment on
it's
that
not,
because we're going to.
It's not about people. It's just about the article, and it's quick. Let me just finish, and I'll get done, and I'll leave you alone, Brian. It's not bad. By Supervisor Loftus, you were mentioning a lawsuit that was over. The tone, the demeanor, and the facts were unsettling. I didn't read it till today. I'd heard about it. I'd heard, you know, horrible things, and actually I didn't think it was as bad as what I heard. But I was concerned, because each resident has to ask himself, why would the township supervisor, our highest elected official, attack a highly respected 501c3, one that we've all donated to, I'm sure, and two senior citizens? That's, you know, two women. In my opinion, maybe more appropriate would be to reach out to offer a compromise, a healing. And I know it's hard to swallow, but if you want to move forward, you can't look backwards. And that's where I'm at. I mean, everybody wants the best for Grosse Seal, and I just thought that this wasn't. I was kind of appalled by the nonprofit with hundreds, not just a couple hundred, hundreds of people are members. I'm not a member, but I'm a supporter, and there are even more supporters than members. And I think most people know. I put my money where my mouth is. I give to a lot of animal shelters, and I've adopted from our animal shelter. Our sailor is perfect. But I expect better behavior from the office of the supervisor, if not the man. And that's where I'm at. I just think it didn't help. And we all want things to go forward. And I'm going to leave it at that. And again, come to our party. It'll be a nice time.
Thank you, Mrs. Walker. Mr. Clark.
Woody Clark, Park Lane. Legal fees?
Warrant list are for Cott, Sagar, and Wysocki in the amount of $17,995 for the TPOAM issues, and then Forrester Law in the amount of $1,000.
Okay, the next item is on 5G. 5G. Any of you people up there know about 5G?
Actually, yes.
And what's it going to do to us? It could kill us.
People actually don't know.
But it's coming. Okay, when your stuff is designed to break down the plan analysis, in the 14 short years, we have gone from 2G to 5G, with a flip phone to smartphone. By design, and we are smarter and healthier. Federal Commission voted to implement its wireless infrastructure order. The order preempts local control, public right-of-way. Wireless companies can now easily install cell phone towers in front of your house without your consent, or to eradicate those nearby intense pulse data, mildew, radiation, electronic microwave radiation. U.S. wireless companies are in charge. About 800,000 new antennas will be deployed, more than a total number of cell phones that have been past 3 decades. Every wireless company will have its own 5G, which requires its installation of new equipment, even though they are planned to existing infrastructure in the form of street lights, plan analysts. Microwaves are probably U.S. Army controlled weapon. active denial system. This would suggest that the Congress plans to formulate 5G employment unless they are here otherwise from constituents, and soon. And then again, when the legislature listens to them, when 5G is tested on 19 cities across the U.S. If you're a wireless system in your home, you're exposed to radiation. This doesn't mean it's safe. Examples include wireless router, TV, cable boxes, PlayStation, Xbox 360, wireless, da-da-da-da-da-da. These devices transmit radio sections 24/7. Any metals, from coil springs to braces in your teeth, direct waves to your body. Both you and your home becomes a radio station. 5G is wireless network that operates in bands up to 100 GHz and GHZs. It requires 5G enabled device receive when they're using this active denial system, you can't get close to it. Too much heat. It's going to be cold. Get ready.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Other public comment not related to tails yet? Ms. Moreau.
All right. I just want to make sure, too, you said something about not tails, not the ACO. It is my public comment.
I'm sorry, can you tell us your name and address for the record, please?
Right, is that correct? All right. Good evening, Jody Morrow, Groseal. On January 28th, I addressed this board and expressed some concerns about our animal control officer. I was very professional and I was respectful as I asked the board to please help me understand a few things. Help me understand why our animal control officer that had been written up over 15 times and suspended for aggressive, unprofessional behavior could continue.
I've cut off your microphone. I already said we're going to do the tails in the block.
I'm not talking about tails. I'm a Groseal resident.
Return to your seat, please. Is there any other public, wait, you don't have to sit down yet. Is there any other public comment on other than animal control, animal shelter, tails issues?
Will McLeod Steele during discussion will we be able to ask questions, or should we talk about that now?
The discussion will be amongst the board.
I'd rather have them up and speak immediately prior to
You want to handle, like, get a block of them also, just like we're doing with this. That's fine. Yeah, you'll be able to come up before we have the discussion, and because I don't think the discussion, the purpose of the discussion tonight is just to talk amongst the board whether we want to do something. It's not about if we do want to do something, what are we going to do? That's going to take some thought, and 5 minutes thinking about it is not the way to do it.
I just want to add, Mr. Budney, I'm not opposed to people asking or making comments after the discussion. I think it'd be good to hear what people
but I
have to say.
Understand we're not going to be discussing what are we, what if we wanted to do a resolution, what is going to be in it. That's not the point of the discussion tonight. The point is, do we want to do something?
Okay, so did we say you'll
The discussion item.
Yes.
we'll get to, you'll be able to comment when we get to McLeod then. Ms. Moreau.
Thank you.
You're on again.
All right, thanks so much. I mean, I would be happy to sit down. I don't want to be disrespectful. All right, let me start over though, okay? So, good evening, Jody Morrow, Groseal, longtime Groseal resident, Groseal alum. On January 28th, I addressed this board and expressed my concerns about our animal control officer. I was professional and respectful as I asked the board to please help me understand a few things. I asked the board to help me understand why our animal control officer that has been written up over 15 times and suspended for aggressive, unprofessional behavior could be so unethical. I asked the board to help me understand if there was a personal relationship on this board to the ACO. And most important, as a mother and a Groseal resident, I asked why the ACO that has been suspended would be permitted to carry a firearm since she is not a police officer. On February 11th, Mr. Loftus, you performed a rebuttal in support of the ACO. This rebuttal was disrespectful and so unprofessional. Mr. Loftus, you went on the defense and the attack mode. You stated that we were 5 disgruntled women that orchestrated a vicious, slanderous attack against you and the ACO. Interesting, since we never even mentioned your name. This is embarrassing behavior from a supervisor. First, we were all separate women that had a concern, each with different stories to tell. We were not a group of women with nothing better to do. Mr. Loftus, you stated that we did this because we just didn't like Julie Cordes. I had to really sit back and think about this type of ignorance coming from a township supervisor. I don't know Julie Cordes as a person or on a personal level. I don't see her when I'm supporting GIRA, Groseal Education Foundation, countless other organizations on Groseal, but I do know in April 2016, my daughter, she wanted to do a fundraiser for the animal shelter. And yes, even as part of TAILS, my family supported the ACO in her efforts as a Groseal resident. And why? That's because that's how I was raised. You treat people kind and you give back. We handed the ACO $269 in a bucket to support the animals. What came next was the letter that she wrote. Mr. Loftus, I want to thank you for asking your deputy to stand up here and read off a list of classes training the ACO has taken. A couple such as Certified with DEA still raised a couple eyebrows, but okay, in my opinion, I call this fluff. What you did was confirm my concern that I addressed to this board, that our ACO is not a police officer and can only enforce animal ordinance. And to add to this, you even confirmed the ACO is not currently on the reserves. Actually, you stated in your own words, Julie Cordes carries for her protection. Our ACO is not a police officer, not even on the reserves at this time, but can play dress up and carry a firearm because you said she could. Lastly, you stated your public comments were slanderous. You stated that our public comments were slanderous towards the ACO. I don't know, possibly Google. Mr. Assorti can help you understand what that means, because we were not slanderous. Because, as you see, everything I stated, you confirmed in your zealous rebuttal as fact. I stand in front here to tell you, you owe us some apologies. Now, we know we're not going to get that from you. It's been proven. But if I have to come to every board meeting until August 2020 and remind you of this, I'm prepared to clear my schedule to do it and make it happen. In fact, you can bet we'll be back to discuss your padded false article of tales. But I would hope right now you are embarrassed. Because you should be. With all the other issues facing our township, such as our bridges, McLeod, you took time to bash a nonprofit that supported this community for over 20 years. Thank you.
Okay. Once again, my article was based on court documents. It's not my, well, there was my opinion, but the court supported Ms. Cordes and myself. The Tails violated the law. They violated state statutes. They violated the 501c3 charter. Deputy Chief Harden explained in clear text why Ms. Cordes is authorized to carry a firearm. She trains. It's part of her job description. The fact that she's no longer reserve has no bearing on this at all, but she has served in law enforcement for 25 years. I think she's pretty well qualified. I don't know what to say. Tails was acting improperly. I have to look after township employees. I will also lead the charge to discipline a township employee who is not acting properly. But to let the social media attack continue, I mean, there's stuff, she's running dog fighting ring stuff. This is just ridiculous, okay? It's just ridiculous. And no, I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to ask you any questions.
Brian, please don't. Let's move on.
Next. Mr. Assorti, did you have a comment you wanted to? Okay. Continuing on the animal control tail saga. Any other comments?
Sarah Slater. I'm a resident of Wyandotte, but I grew up on Groseal alumni. I just want to take time. Thank you, Mr. Malvesto, for that sincere apology. I'm glad that someone knows right from wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. Okay, other comments? We'll close the public comments and move into our McLeod discussion. Let's move into McLeod. Mr. Buddy, how do you want to kick this off?
Well, and this was meant to be very, very simple. There's been discussion, and we know things are going on over at McLeod Steel, at the McLeod Steel site, I should say. And the question came up, should the board, and this is my question to the board, should the board adopt
a resolution taking a stance as to what we want to see over at that area. What I passed out to you right before and I don't expect you to really read it at this time, because again, what I would like us to decide is, do we or do we not want to do a board action with a proposal on a stance towards the McLeod Steel site? That's really number one. If we do, then we need to put some thought, a lot of thought into what we want to say and put forth to Trenton. Back in 2001, the township board at that time adopted a resolution regarding what they wanted over there. We can look at that. We can say we want to stick with that. We can go some other direction, or we can go that we as a board don't want to take any action, don't want to do any resolution. I think it's appropriate that we do think about this and come to a conclusion which way we want to go. And that's what I wanted to talk about tonight. Which way do we want to go? Do we want to do something or don't we?
Well, I guess we could add it as an action item and take them a vote.
Well,
but,
I mean, and this is just, think about, and it's something that has to be thought about, and that's why I didn't want to go into, well, let's put a proposal together. We can't do that at this time because we haven't thought about it properly.
Well, the situation right now, to my knowledge, unless something's happened in the interim I'm not aware of, and it could very well be, MSC and MSC is handling this, has not made a presentation to Trenton's Planning Commission yet saying what they intend to do with what is now their property. So we could all assume that it's going to be an intermodal site because they have rail, highway, and waterfront, a 1,700-foot deep water port. We could assume that, but we don't know that. And it'll be up to Trenton's Planning Commission and Trenton City Council to decide what they're going to allow, if they're going to rezone it, what they're not going to allow. In April, the initiative begins, and I'm not working from notes, unfortunately. In April is when the movement becomes to put that site on the Superfund site, to open up those funds. It's the federal government, it's other people's money. It's going to be a long, long process in the remediation. We're talking a couple of years down the road before the first rebuild of the site, first industrial or whatever reuse happens. What I can say with a relative degree of certainty, and I've said it before, the EPA only mandates 2 levels of remediation, residential and non-residential. You could imagine if it were going to go to residential, it would be a much, much higher standard with much, much, much higher cost. And when Crown Enterprises purchased the land, they had no intention of, and that was part of their purchase offer and part of the, what was the covenant and all that last series of documents that came out. They had no intention. We're not going to be bound to remediate to residential. They planned an industrial or a non-residential. It's the only other one, non-residential use. So that's where that's going. And then at the same time, they're taking the EPA away, which it just seems incongruous, but not my decision. That's where we are. We're waiting. We don't know what Trenton's going to do, but the demolition has started as promised. There was one notice of violation. I have the data on that. There was no threat to anyone. Whoever made the Facebook comment that he smelled the cloud of asbestos coming across the river, well, I don't know what he was smelling because there was no discernible asbestos in any of the on-body detectors or on the perimeter detectors on the site. It was just a case of cutting the panels improperly instead of running them underwater when it was 0 outside. The friable, which is another word for crumbleable, asbestos coating was crumbled. So that's probably going to be dropped. That's going nowhere. Again, no asbestos release. It goes on. It's under close scrutiny. And I guess if we want to weigh in, we ought to wait and see what they offer. I would say let's wait and see what they offer to Trenton first and what their planning commission brings forward to their city council.
And you bring up a very good point about Crown Enterprises. They bought it with what they wanted, with their idea of what they wanted to do, and if Trenton, for instance, decided to keep it the multi-use, which would be a more expensive cleanup, they would walk away. So one thing, again, that we need to think about if we were going to craft something is, is it better for us to get some remediation or no remediation? Yeah, you can hold to and have we want the best remediation possible, but we're not going to get any. Sure, someone could come in, but right now they have someone there. These are all things that have to be brought up. I was thinking if we do something, it should be about the impacts, that we talk about the impacts in a resolution rather than the business that's going to be there. Because
I've heard a couple of statements here, and just for my clarification, Brian, you said there's residential or non-residential. Yes. And Jim, you said mixed use.
It's zoned
mixed use residential.
Yeah, it's zoned mixed use right now. That's what it's zoned, and they want to change. The Crown Enterprises, of course, wants to change it to industrial, and part of that, number one, that's whatever they put in there, that's what they're going to do is industrial.
Well, and
But are they
Ted.
currently going to clean it to its current zoning standard?
No. To my knowledge, they're not, and that was talked about at the public meeting that they had some months ago. They are going to be part of the cleanup. They're going to be paying millions of dollars, even though they're going to probably pay the least of the parties involved. EPA by far will be putting in the bulk of the money.
I think the mixed use zoning, Ted, is a vestige of when Trenton was looking at doing something itself with the property. I think they were looking at not residential but commercial, and possible residential like on an upper floor, so there's no connection between the residents and the actual ground. So I don't think I think that's just a vestige, but obviously they're going to have to try to get that changed. My concern is I do agree that at some point we should make, our interests in the situation apparent to our neighbor. But again, they are our neighbor, and I don't know if I'm wrong about this, Tom, but I think we can ask for things, but we can't. I think we have to be careful not to demand things of Trenton. But obviously we want to keep up a good relationship between their community and our community, and we share that riverfront. But we don't want to imply that they're being lax either, right? At the same time,
Right. Well, I mean, we're certainly not in a position to demand anything from them. It's their town, it's there, and they're going to decide. On the other hand, informing them of what we're concerned about, which is what if we do a resolution, it would be, doesn't hurt. But you're absolutely right.
But any resolution, this resolution, I assume, is still in effect. Is that correct?
I don't believe that it's been taken up. No.
Substantially, would any new resolution be substantially different than what we've already?
They're talking about a certified resolution that the Township Board did in 2001.
You have a
Correct.
copy, Dale? Let's put it on the.
Yeah, here you go. I got an extra. There, you got one, Dale?
But I would think that any resolution that we would do would be substantially the same as this one. If this one already exists, why would we do it again?
Well,
have
to rescind
unless you want our names on it.
No.
We've got to rescind the last statement there where it says, resolves that it opposes the proposed industrial use of the former McLeod site as an intermodal transportation center and supports the efforts of Wayne County, City of Trenton, and City of Riverview to foster an alternative use for that site. That's no longer true Trenton and Riverview have not taken a stand, nor has Wayne County, as to what's going in there. So that obviously
It
is no longer
it would have
applicable.
we could basically go along this with some tweaking. We could come up with our own. Or we could do nothing. I mean, there's a lot that can be done. But having not discussed this at all I wanted to do tonight was get the discussion out for people on the board to think, do we want to do something?
I guess we should hear from the other gentleman as well, but I think you're right that, at some point when we know what is happening there, it would be prudent for us to outline some of our concerns. I think that's the word you guys used.
Certainly could be more exact at that point. It's kind of like the marijuana thing. We're opting out because we don't know what's going on.
I remember at the time that the board passed this resolution, there was a specific proposal for an intermodal use of the site. And I know at the time my employer was actually doing a phase 1 and 2 environmental assessment of the site. And so there were, cogs beginning to move in the direction of a redevelopment. And I think the result of those environmental studies caused the developer to move away from the project, and it fell away again.
19 years later.
Yeah.
18 years later.
Jim, I would support your idea. I like moving forward with the impact as opposed to the economic discussion. I've had the benefit of receiving a number of articles from Mr. Karmazin, and we certainly have Mr. DeBose here today, who has been very, very active, diligent, and keeping an eye on what's going on over there. The wind blows from the west, and what goes on over there impacts us. And the water flows around Grosse Ile, including Swan Island, Calf Island, and other areas. And I think when we start putting together what is the impact, what is going on here, that's an educational process. And I think you gentlemen have been able to certainly highlight some things that the rest of us should consider. Impact, to me, Jim, is where we should be looking at, and I agree with you, and I would support that 100%.
I would just ask if you gentlemen are sharing documents with some board members. Unless I'm not finding them, it'd be nice for all of us to have the benefit of the same information. We do want to do the right thing here, and the more we know, and from the more perspectives that we get information, the better our decisions can be.
And that was a request that I'd made over a series of emails, and we had discussions about what can we look at, what's the impact going to be. So I didn't interpret it as a attempt to keep anybody in the board in the dark, so to speak. And I understand that's not where you're going.
That's not where I was going with
I
this.
know it's not where you're not going. Say that fast. And I do think it is a lot of material to read. I received a lot of material on the bridge, and I have had the benefit of some material on what's going on with McLouth. Like you, Mr. Malvesto, I have lived here for a very long time, and I appreciate what we've done. You're an outdoorsman, and I think this is something that we should all look at, because this is something that impacts our entire community. And I think that it involves your property values. It involves your health, and frankly, there's a lot of good reason for us to go forward and discuss with Trenton what the impact is. And if we're looking at a lower cleanup with the environmental, that costs us. We're subsidizing that. That costs us with the health issues that are inevitable. That costs us with property values. That costs us all the way down the road. And I'm concerned that without having other communities consider the impact, and I do agree with you, being a good neighbor means a number of things, but I think that this is something, we have some people in this community that are very, very, very well qualified to help us with that, and I think this is the kind of material that we should look at. The marijuana, I agree, that's important, but this is something that is a huge environmental impact, and I'm very concerned about that, and I appreciate the opportunity, Jim, that you're bringing to the board.
Would that site qualify as a, maybe we should talk to Trenton about an opt-in and doing a big grow operation on the other side.
The way the wind blows.
Breathe deep, man. That was an old Doonesbury. Do you remember?
So we kind of, I won't say a consensus, but we're moving towards, we'd like to have get our position known on what happens there, how it impacts us. Obviously, if it really takes off and becomes a very thriving, successful enterprise, there will be more truck traffic. King Road was the Class A because it's already beat up with all the trash trucks. A couple of the rail lines have been pulled. Other ones may get used more. The 1,700-foot deepwater port we think will be used more. I don't see a threat with additional bridge swings. There could be potential threat, though, with the size of the ships coming through. Great Lakes, the biggest Great Lakes freighter is 1,000 feet. Some of the if there are any salties come in, they're usually somewhat shorter, 600-700 feet. But there's only room for two at a time. So, and since they won't be using self-loaders or onloaders, you're talking probably 24 to 48 hours to unload, offload. There'll be many more bridge swings for recreational traffic, but recreational boats aren't going to knock a bridge off a pedestal either if one gets a little bit out of steerage. So we do need to get together, put our list of concerns down, make sure that Trenton's Planning Commission knows about it, and that's about the extent of what we can do. Unless we really don't have a seat at the table.
Right, and again, the purpose was to do just this, get us thinking about it, see if we want to actually do a formal proposal, and but do that formal proposal that you really would hit home as to what we're really concerned about. So,
in addition, Jim, if I might add, in addition to the environmental issue, the freighters that are coming down here have a larger beam. And my understanding is that was one of the reasons why there was so much opposition before, is that the clearance there, the beam on the larger freighters is larger than the opening. So there's going to have to be some work done, some decisions being made. Do we take, as an example, a freighter with a 45-foot beam through a 50-foot clearance? Yeah, that can be done, I suppose, on a regular basis. But do you take a freighter that has a larger beam than the opening? And that bridge is not, you're not able to do that. And that's a problem. So we're back to where we were 20 years ago.
That's way beyond our control.
But a point well taken, and I don't know if Mr. Karmazin, do you still work for the bridge company? Okay. I just wondered if you might shed some light on it. One of the concerns that came up, and again, I don't want to scratch a wound open, was that the Maroon Company had railroad status, right? Still do.
Still own the
so
railroad.
When you talk about the potential of what a railroad can do to a bridge, which was, so I'm just saying the point is well taken that we all have a concern of what could possibly down the road happen with that bridge.
But bridge companies have condemnation authority too. So that's how they built the Ambassador Bridge. They have, and I don't know who has supremacy over the two. I would think it'd be easier to move a rail line than a bridge. So, but I don't. Congress gives the supremacy to whoever they want to, as we're fighting the grade separation issues. But bridge companies have. So to say that Maroon, this railroad will condemn the bridge and tear it down is just there's no basis in fact.
Again, I'm just it's a what if scenario that we wonder what might happen to the bridge with ships coming through if you can't get the big enough ships through. You have two options, right? You take down the bridge or you change the bridge, but most likely the ships make it in. All over the world you see environmentalists fighting against in ports, and they always win. They dredge deeper, they build wider channels, the ships always get in.
And quite frankly, that's one of the reasons we should be talking about this now, and being prepared to do if this board wants to do something to to get those thoughts over there early on, not after it's up and running.
I'm going to paint a bit of a different picture for you. And the reason I can do this, and I can do it with knowledge, is that I deal with this every day. The business I am currently in, I sell large industrial forklift trucks, which also includes container handlers. I am in a intermodal yard no less than 4 times a week, maybe 5 times a week. I deal with U.S. Steel. I deal with Nicholson. I deal with CPG. I deal with CNN. It benefits me because I sell and I rent them equipment. I make good money off that. But the reality is that each one of these yards, whether the containers or the whatever it happens to be, when it's on a truck, you got one truck coming in and you got one truck going out for every load. You are talking about hundreds of trucks per day. Will it have an economic impact on the downriver area? It most certainly will. Whatever route those trucks decide to use to get access to I-75 will be the wedge that is going to be driven between our communities. Do we have a say? Do we have a reason to be concerned? We most certainly do. Every yard I go into, the dust that comes up off the ground with the movement of the trucks and the forklift equipment, it is just one large cloud of dust. If you remember, at the toll bridge, when that property was they first started to remediate it, they put in wells and they pump them to a pit, and it's sucked out and it's removed as hazardous waste. They planted trees for one experiment to see whether the trees would eat up the chemicals that were buried in the ground. Eventually, it was all excavated down, and that property was capped with a specific type of clay. I'm sorry, I don't have what that clay is in front of me, but it was capped with a specific type of clay to keep those chemicals from leaching back up to the surface and back into the surface and back into the Detroit River. The piece of property at McLeod Steel, unless they scraped off X amount of feet off the top of it and capped it, the dust, the chemicals, the contamination, it will remain in that ground. Whether there's buildings there or not, whether they put in pavement or not, that dirt, that dust, those contaminants are going to be there, and the movement of trucks coming in and out are going to raise clouds of dust, and that dust is going to blow along with the prevailing wind. It will have an impact on us. We have every reason and every right to come up with some sort of a resolution and go before the Trenton City Council and tell them that we are absolutely opposed to any development of this type. We may not have a say in it. We may not be able to control it or have any impact into what happens. But as a responsibility to the residents of this township, we need to do something like this. The crafting of a resolution, it should be taken into consideration what needs to be put down and what needs to be moved forward. I could care less right now, and I'm talking as a resident, whether I happen to offend the Trenton City Council, because this is my island. This is my home. These are your homes. The value of my home will be impacted. And to think that Wyandotte may and I'm not using Wyandotte, I'm not criticizing Wyandotte, but to think that Wyandotte won't be impacted by the amount of traffic that is going to be going out onto Jefferson, or that Riverview won't be impacted, or Trenton won't be impacted, or those communities that lead out to 75 won't be impacted, that's taking a blind eye as to what's going on. And I say this because I deal with these intermodal companies and the amount of traffic that will be generated. There is no way, there is no benefit to these people to have an intermodal shipping port simply because of trucks or trains. They have to make use of the boats, of shipping. We're the Great Lakes. That's what grew Detroit. The fact that all the lake commerce coming through. The big impediment to using these ships is that toll bridge. That was the basis for the initial lawsuit to try to take it over. The cost of that bridge is chump change. It's pocket change to the people that we're talking about. They can buy that at any given time without blinking an eye, and there is nothing to keep them from tearing that bridge down. That is the picture that we face, and that is why it is imperative that this board come up with a resolution crafted specifically. If we insult somebody, we insult somebody, but these are our homes, this is our property, this is where we live. We have every right to, and we should be doing it without question. Not asking whether we should or whether we shouldn't, whether we might not. It needs to be done for that reason. I doubt if we'll have an impact, but that's what we need to be doing. It's not a pretty picture.
Mr. Karmazin, some time ago, we had a conversation on that bridge being on the national transportation infrastructure. Is it as simple as, I own it now, I'm taking it out? Is there accountability beyond that?
Could you repeat that, Brian?
The toll bridge on part of the national transportation infrastructure.
On the national, I'm not
as
quite,
part of a
it's part of the public road network.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. First, do you have any other questions? I do have some remarks I could make to.
First of all, we want your name and address for the record.
Greg Karmazin.
I was just going to say, Greg,
also,
before you start, if the board is done, is any more comments by the board? We are ready for you,
I just want to say one thing, that I really want to be proactive with Trenton on this issue, and I agree with most of the things that were said by the board tonight. Not all, most of them. Thank you.
Mr. Karmazin.
Great. All right, thanks. Well, first of all, I want to thank Supervisor Loftus and Trustee Budney for putting this on as a discussion item, because I think this board needs to address this, as a number of you have made comments to. Personally, having grown up in this area, being from a family that's been on this island since the 1920s, I have a pretty long-term perspective of the history of the island and downriver, and I would say that this is probably the most important project that has happened in terms of how it will affect the future of this community, as well as at least the channel communities in downriver that has been here, that has happened here since my family moved here in the 1920s. So this is an extremely significant issue. And I think that it is incumbent on this board to take a very, very careful look at this. And I would say that tonight, obviously, is just the beginning of a dialogue, and this is a highly complicated issue. There is a lot here to look at, from environmental situation, from infrastructure, road traffic flow, from the impact on the toll bridge, but also having to take into consideration what's going on with the Wayne County Bridge. Now, I know, that's not the purpose of this discussion item, but those two issues are very tied together. We have got to consider the long-term consequences of the Wayne County Bridge to the traffic flow to and from the island. And just, again, to reiterate my earlier answer to Clerk O'Connor's question, I just want to make it really clear to everybody, I have no relationship with Paul Smoke at this point, other than I would consider him a friend. His family's been friends of, the Smoke family's been friends of the Karmazin family since the 1920s. But other than that, I have no relationship with him or the bridge company. And full disclosure, and I believe in that totally. But I will say that I certainly understand from the work that I did do for the bridge company from 2006 to 2011, I do understand a lot of facts about the McClough site, the toll bridge, and the Wayne County Bridge. And there's a lot of information that I have about that I'm not going to go into tonight, but I would be more than willing to share that with the board. And I think that I have actually shared quite a few documents with the board, probably more than you care to read at some point. Of course, you probably know that I'm a board member of the Grosse Ile Civic Association, which is a community nonprofit group, and Bill Heil is actually here as the president of the Civic Association, and he's going to make prepared remarks on behalf of the Civic Association. But I do want to address a few points that came up in the discussion. First of all, from my standpoint, one of the most problematic aspects of this entire project is the way it was handled by Wayne County. When they put that property into foreclosure, it did not have to go through the process that it went through to immediate sale. And that's something that, frankly, hasn't been disclosed to the public in a fair and thorough way. And that is something that is, I think, probably going to be reviewed in the way that that was handled. Secondly, when that property went into public ownership, a comprehensive environmental study assessment should have been done, and it's not been done. In fact, you had Brian Kelly came here, the project manager for the EPA and head of this project, came here in September, and I believe he made remarks that were pretty clear that the EPA, MDEQ, no one knows the total environmental situation on that site. There has not been a comprehensive environmental study of that site. There is quite a bit of information that is known, and to the extent that the issues that are known are in an agreement between the current owners and the EPA, the MDEQ, that's good. That's good news. I mean, we all agree that the buildings should come down and that the cleanup should start. But what we don't, I think, the citizens of Grosse Ile, Trenton, and Riverview all, I think, need to know is this is not going to be a complete cleanup of all the environmental problems on the site, because we don't even know what all the environmental problems are on that site. And that probably should have been the first step. And if you talk to people that have been involved in environmental cleanup projects in other parts of Michigan, even frankly downriver, if you look at the way BASF handled the Wyandotte Chemical South Works cleanup, that was the first thing they did. The first thing they did was a complete assessment of all the problems, and they were very transparent, very honest with the city of Wyandotte in working out agreements on how they would clean that up and address the problems. And they did so, I think, in a very responsible manner. And I think that that's a resource. We have some resources in the community, of course, that you may be aware of that were very knowledgeable about that project. And I think the people that are involved in that could help this board understand the situation in McLeod. But getting into a couple of specific things that were stated here. As far as the asbestos cleanup goes, there's been statements that no asbestos has been released. That's not entirely accurate. From the data that I've seen, and it's been explained to me, there certainly has been asbestos that's been released, but it's been below the threshold that would constitute a hazard to the workers on site or to the public off-site. However, keep in mind that asbestos is a persistent element, so it doesn't go away. And if every day you're tearing down that asbestos and some of it's airborne and it's blowing over to Grosse Ile, it may be accumulating on the lawns of the residents of Westwood Road and other parts of the North End. So, I mean, I think this is something that we need to very carefully understand, and as the time comes up for public involvement and comment with the EPA, one of the questions I have for them, and I think many other people do too, is, what's the cumulative impact of asbestos cleanup over time? I mean, that's a massive structure, and asbestos covers the steel siding of that from pretty much top to bottom. So, let's be careful about understanding what's going on with the asbestos and address that. Also, as far as the intermodal port, okay, I know that there's been statements that, well, we're not sure if it's going to be an intermodal port or not, or it may be something else. But if you look at the documents that were provided to the Wayne County Commission that helped to facilitate the sale, and I've obtained them partly through Freedom of Information Act, partly from credible sources from the Wayne County Commission, it's very clear that in the process of the request for proposal consideration, the winning candidate of that RFQ process made it known that they intend to build an intermodal shipping port on that site. That was the basis of their proposal. Now, could they change it? Could they modify it in some way? Yeah, could it be called a logistics center or something other, some other semantics? But I think as Trustee Malvesto said, the only thing that makes sense about that site for a operation like this is using that port. Otherwise, you would if this was merely a truck and rail type operation, you'd be close to I-75, and there's tons of land available in downriver and around Detroit area that you could do that. The thing that makes this site unique is the deep water port. So it's clear that that's the intent, to use that. Now, as far as the ships coming through the toll bridge, well, I know some would say that back in the time of McLeod, many freighters came through, and when DTE had regular deliveries of coal by freighter, many more freighters came through. But a lot's changed, and I think in terms of the attitudes of people in the community about how they view delays going across the river. Also, when you're talking about the potential, anyways, of the county bridge being closed for a long-term period of time. Now, I mean, let's hope that doesn't happen, and let's hope that the repair work over there is successful. Although it's a slightly different topic, but I did read in Discover Downriver, the website and the Facebook page that promotes and markets Downriver, that apparently there is going to be a 4-month closure in 2020 of the county bridge for repairs, and that the repair cost is pegged now at $1.5 million.
We don't know what it could be. Up to 4 months. It could be 2 weeks. We don't know.
Okay.
We know. Wayne County just said, be prepared. It may take up to 4 months. It may be significantly less.
Okay.
So obviously we're all hoping for less.
And the $1.5 million figure that was also reported by. Okay. Well, all right. In any event, the point is Yeah. Well, that's another issue. It's very complex, but you have to understand the consequences of for that bridge to understand our travel on and off the island. Again, getting back to the issue of the freighter or the freighters that might come to this port, it's not just necessarily two ships a day. You also have tugs that have to guide a ship in and out of through the toll bridge, and to the extent that those tugboats don't leave at the same come in with the ship, but they leave. So then you may get into multiple swings for one ship, and that could happen a couple of times a day. And the thing is, you got keep in mind about freighters. Every freighter that goes through that toll bridge, it doesn't matter if it's 600 feet or 300 feet or 800 feet, they're going to handle it the same way. It's going to be a 25-minute swing. That's what it takes for a bridge, the bridge to safely handle a freighter, 25 minutes. And now for recreational boats, it averages about 7. Tugs a little bit, probably in between somewhere. So these are potentially significant delays. And with a commercial ship, commercial ships have right-of-way under federal law. So that means that ship could be coming through rush hour, and you could have a 25-minute delay in the middle of rush hour. And what if that's the single bridge on and off Grosse Ile? I mean, then you've got a real problem. So,
Greg, I want to move you along a little bit. We have a lot of speculation here. These are things that I think we've all considered at one time, and we don't know. We don't. Yeah, these are all things we're considering. We'll work it into our impact. Right. If we do a resolution trying to mitigate or control the impact, but we're doing a lot of all things we've considered.
Right. Well, I think the issue really comes down to what's in the best interest of Grosse Ile. That's your as Trustee Malvesto said, your mission, your board, your mission is to defend our rights, our best position. You may not have the ability to ultimately impact on what happens over in Trenton, but I do think this body has a responsibility to take a very careful look at this project, all aspects of it, the issues in the environment, the transportation impact, all of these things, and at least put forth a position that represents the best interests of Grosse Ile. And ultimately, this may end up being a negotiated thing. There's a long process that's going on over in Trenton. But I do think that the Trenton Planning Commission needs to understand, and the Trenton City Council needs to hear from Grosse Ile as to what we think of the project and what we think the impact might be on us, and what might be in the best interest of all three communities, Riverview, Trenton, and Grosse Ile. So I'll leave it with that, but I would leave the final suggestion is I think this is a topic that's sufficiently complicated enough that it would probably be a good idea to have a study session, where you would bring in some outside experts or people from the community even that have expertise that could give you advice in this. I mean, it's more than something that can be handled on a regular business meeting comments, because it is really complicated, and the consequences for Grosse Ile, Riverview, and Trenton are permanent. This is something, once this happens, it's done. So, I think it's worth your time, and I know you have a lot on your plate. You got a lot of issues to deal with, but this one I would submit to you is one of the most important that is facing this community now and in the future.
Greg,
I have
go ahead, Tom.
Quickly, I think Supervisor Loftus was trying to ask you this question. You may have misunderstood it. But is there anything that would prohibit the current owner of the toll bridge or a future owner of the toll bridge from tearing it down? Is there any government?
Okay, well, sure. Let me speak. I'm speaking just as Greg Karmazin. Okay, and I know this matter was at the heart of a very expensive litigation that between the township and the bridge company. But let me just flat out say, based on everything I saw during my time that I worked with the bridge company, and these documents are all part of the court filings and the discussion. So I'm not divulging anything that's inside information. I never once saw any legal analysis that said that the railroad could condemn the toll bridge. I don't believe that there's any legal basis for that claim.
For anybody who was to purchase it in the future,
sure.
Is there any regulation? Is there anything else
to tear it
that
down?
would prevent them from tearing that bridge down?
Well, that as far as I know, being that it's part of the public road network, and it has been for over 100 years, even though it's privately owned, it is part of the public road network, and that was, I think, in part of how it was originally chartered with the state of Michigan to serve this public purpose of transportation. And as far as I know, the bridge could not be torn down as being part of the public road network. But I think clearly, we don't want to do anything that jeopardizes the roadway that goes to the bridge. And there is the control of the toll bridge, and the bridge company stops at their property. So one of the issues that came up in the first proposal of Mr. Maroon's company was some realignment of the access to the toll bridge, and I think that was in fact part of the reason the bridge company originally joined with the township. Quite frankly, they're hard to believe now, but they were both on the same side in the early part of this whole issue in opposing the intermodal shipping port, because they both saw a concern about the impact to the access to the bridge, not the bridge itself. That actually came up much later. But yes, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's precisely what caused the bridge company and the township to join together in opposing the port. It was the access, not a threat to the bridge itself in terms of condemnation. And again, just to reiterate the answer to your question, my knowledge, that bridge cannot be torn down.
Thank you. I think that was the question being asked, and I appreciate that.
Greg, just quickly, you question the dollar values that were out there, the 1.5. Any dollar value that has been put out has been given to us by Wayne County. Doesn't mean that those dollar values are going to stay the same by the time the work gets going. They could change, but Wayne County provided us the amounts.
Well, again, I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but this here is a memo that, again, I received from Freedom of Information Act and other sources. And it makes clear that the Wayne County's consulting engineer has estimated the cost of repair of the Wayne County Bridge at $17.6 million. The first phase, $600,000.
And that figure is still what's being put out there. That 1.5 is for some work on the piers. From reading what I've been able to read on it, I'm not sure it's all the pier work. It's the pier work they're going to do in 19.
Yeah, well,
so
so the internal estimate from Wayne County is 17.6, and quite frankly, again, I'm only speaking from my own perspective. Having looked at the inspections, which apparently Wayne County won't even give to you, I only got them through the Michigan Department of Transportation. I would really suggest that this board bring in a structural engineer, somebody who's familiar with bridge construction, to validate these estimates and these repairs. Because, let's face it, in 2007, the county told us that bridge was going to be good for 30 years, and that, don't worry, this is it. We're going to shut it down for 8 months, and everybody's going to be inconvenienced, but you're going to have that bridge for another 30 years. Well, it's 10 years later that we find out that there's serious problems. And let's be honest, some of the problems that they discovered, were absolutely documented in inspection reports that were available in 2007 and even earlier. And I don't have to tell you, you've probably seen Channel 7's report about bridge inspection techniques in Wayne County. And my understanding that, that is an issue that's being looked into by a number of different agencies. So, I think we have to be realistic about what's going on here. It's not our bridge. I understand that. That's, something we all know that. But I understand the reality is the impact is on us. The impact is on this community. And I think it would be negligent if this board doesn't understand what's going on with the county bridge and the repair plans, and work with the county to make sure that what is done is in the best interests of Grosse Ile. Okay.
Thank you. That covered a lot of territory. Thanks, Greg. And Mr. Heil, you had a written a prepared presentation.
Thank you for making this possible, Jim, Brian. I think we have opportunity here with this issue to serve the community. I'm reading this because our group, I'm speaking for the association, has felt this is important, and we wanted to make sure that we had documented it. It's short. It was intended to be that way because we weren't even sure we'd have much time to comment when this all started. We appreciate the dialogue. But I'm speaking to encourage you, the board, to affirm the township's position on zoning in Trenton on the McLeod Steel property. Our current position is affirming mixed-use development and was resolved by resolution that was adopted in 2001. Recently, Brian affirmed support for improvements being made to the McLeod property and expressed concern that traffic congestion and groundwater pollution be addressed. Trenton's Planning Commission is to meet March 27th of this year, and the agenda could quite possibly address this issue. They have pending before them a need to decide on a request to make the property industrial. Sustaining our current position and conveying that message to Trenton supports our position of consistency with mixed-use positions now in place with Trenton and Riverview. This affirmation supports the best interests of Grosse Ile residents as well. Doing so is true leadership. Here, excuse me. Is that straight? Not quite. Okay, thank you. There are three major concerns here to illustrate the point about how this is impacting, that's the word that we're using, our community. Traffic congestion is potentially severe. Years ago, SEMCOG researched impact on vehicular traffic for logistics operations on the 76-acre site on the north end of this property. The operations proposed at that time were forwarded by the same organizations as are making the request today. The major difference is the size of the new request. Land available for operations now is roughly 3 times the size that it was before. SEMCOG research on the first proposal anticipated 300 trucks would travel daily through the site. Further, at least 2 trains, each at least 2 miles in length, would be added daily to rail congestion. The new request has potential to dramatically increase the congestion that is anticipated. The circumstance has more impact for residents of Grosse Ile and those who live off the island, who commute to work here, or who are students here. The impact is more than from the majority of citizens of Trenton or Riverview. The logistics activity is at the far east end of the municipal boundaries for both Trenton and Riverview. That significantly reduces the inconvenience for travel to work, school appointments, schools or appointments, and emergency vehicular traffic. Grosse Ile residents experience the full impact. They must consistently pass through this congestion daily. Now, the second issue is regarding property taxes. Potential buyers of homes here on the island may, in some cases, find added congestion and inconvenience a deal-breaking negative. Being on time for work and appointments is important in our lives. It may take longer to sell homes, and when they do, usually prices go down. A decline in housing prices converts to a lower tax base. Our third concern is that groundwater at the site is heavily contaminated. That water has a potential to flow underground to Grosse Ile in surface currents, in subsurface currents, and release toxins into our community. McLeod site's exact level of contamination has never been determined. It is extensive. But there are other sites with vast amounts of contamination that have been remediated to mixed use successfully by contractors with extensive experience in these projects. Expert studies of circumstance need be made before zoning decisions are undertaken. This issue is about the quality of our lives. Affirming the existing resolution or crafting a new one is leadership that supports that quality. That's the point.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Mr. DeBussy?
Hi, everyone. I know it's been a long night. I know I'm kind of taking different time, but I just wanted to add some positivity into this a little bit, so I'm going to do a couple other
First,
quick...
introduce yourself.
Sure.
Tell everybody.
My name is Kyle DeBussy, 21719 West River Road. I don't represent Westcroft. My cousin Erica is the boss over there at Westcroft, but obviously care very deeply about Westcroft Gardens. It's been in the family for a long time. So first, a big thank you to the Township Board for the quick action on the lighthouse. I'm on the board of the Grosse Ile Historical Society, and while I'm probably taking a little bit of license here, I have been leading the event, so I'm excited to announce we're doing a fundraiser on July 27th, chartering the Diamond Jack to help with the Grosse Ile Lighthouse, so I'm really happy about that. Also, a big thank you for the work on West River Road. Really excited as this spring season starts that we'll have that road there, and hopefully lots of people coming to buy flowers and other things over at Westcroft Gardens. And also excited to announce that it's the 100-year anniversary of Westcroft Gardens becoming a plant nursery. My great-grandfather turned it into a plant nursery after he used mustard gas in World War I. It used to be a hay farm until there was cars and there was no need for hay for horses anymore. And she's here. I asked her before. I hope it's okay I call her out, but Kira's here. A lot of people don't know Westcroft's run basically by 3 women that maintain everything there. 27 acres, a big job. And Kira was Westcroft all day working and is here now to be here at the Township Board. So an island resident, all run by island residents. And then finally, thank you to, I think when I first came to the Township Board about this, it was around the water issue. And I think the Grosse Ile Nature and Land Conservancy brought up the dust control issue. I know the Township is on record with the EPA with concerns about those. I'm happy the Township was on record of those because obviously we had issues with the asbestos. And I want to, I don't know if this is proper to say, but I want to be clear about that too. I think, well, first, the reason that was even known is because an island resident basically saw that happening. It wasn't because there was any government agency on site or anything like that. An island resident saw from this side, not where I can see it. I see McLeod Steel every day, but from the other side, the basically it being torn down. It wasn't just that they weren't wetting it down, but they were using metal on the thing when they should have been using a rubber thing. So, the reason we know even about that is because we're all being active and looking at this. So I can't, put more on what others have said here. Greg, very, very knowledgeable. Bill Heil, I think, said some great things. But for me, I agree. It's just completely important. And if there's a positive way to approach this, it's about what kind of community we want to live in. I think we all recognize just how important the waterfront is to us. And I think downtown Detroit recognizes that. They've made an incredible investment in the waterfront. I think it's brought a lot back to that city. And if we can kind of push for that, as difficult as it might be down here, I think it's going to help all of us. I'm not here to say business is bad. Our family is a business owner here on the island. But we do have to think about what kind of community we're going to live in and what's going to bring long-term prosperity to us. I don't think another intermodal shipping port is going to be what's best for our downriver communities, or more shipping. Every time someone comes to visit here, one of the first drives I take them is right down West Jefferson and seeing all the industry. And if that keeps coming downriver, I think that's going to make this place a worse place to live. So I think we've got to do our best to defend that. And I would say, I think you've all done a great job of working with Trenton. I know I see my kind of role is dealing with the citizens of Trenton. There's been really good citizen kind of engagement on this. Trenton Visionaries, they've been fighting on this for a long time. They've been actually really good at bringing Groseal and Riverview residents to do a cleanup to residential levels from the beginning. But there are ways that we can engage, through Wayne County, through the EPA, through the MDEQ, learning from Greg, the Michigan Department of Transportation. So there's ways that we as a township can engage in this process while collaborating with Trenton and advocating for our interests, so I'll leave it there. I mean, I know I came last time pretty hard with 600 petitions from around downriver, 100 here on Groseal. I feel negligent. I haven't been able to be as active in this because it's difficult. It's really complicated. There's a lot that's happening. But I want to be responsible in how I communicate with those folks and just with people. And I'm glad that this discussion's happening and that we're starting to have this. So the more we can advocate on our interests, I think the better. Yep.
I apologize. Your first name again?
Kyle.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could come back at a later time, at another time.
Sure. Yeah.
Give us a slight history on Westcroft Gardens, including the Chinese junks.
Oh yes, yeah. That my father worked on it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great story. Yeah. But no, we'd be happy to. I know my cousin Erica would really be happy to talk to you all about the 100-year anniversary over there. But
sometime prior to the birthday.
Yep, exactly. That'd be great. Well, thank you all. Thank you for hearing me. Appreciate it.
Okay, what other comments do we have? The board, we have some work. We got a lot of learning to do first. What's our next step?
I think
What's
a
our
lot
next
of
step?
a lot of good information did come out of this, and I think we all came from our separate points of view, and you can kind of put all that together into a bigger picture. I think we all expressed different concerns that we had, and coming out of that, you can put all those little pieces together to come up with a whole. I think it is good that we reach out to our neighbor. I certainly didn't want to imply that, I want to tiptoe around because they're our neighbor. I just thought we wouldn't want another community pouncing in here and telling us what to do or not to do with the airport. So, but I do get the impacts, and I grew up around shipping, and I know right now nothing bigger can come in here than can get through the St. Lawrence Seaway, but that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be Laker traffic or barges or between Canada and the U.S. that will have bigger boats. But I'm with you, Kyle. I dream of a better use for that space. Even if you want to use the port, there's a little try at a Great Lakes tourism cruise industry. How much more cool it would be to have small cruise ships coming in with German tourists. Oh no, but they're thinking outside the box might give us some better options than that. And I'm very excited. We had a presentation from the gardening people that work the
of Hope.
Gardens of Hope, and that I didn't even really know much about it, and I'm just so pumped about that. That's really great. So happy to see lovely things happening there.
So we know we have the next timing point is Trenton's Planning Commission. We'll have to find out. I'll find out. Mr. Ream find out what is on their agenda most likely.
So if we go back not too many years ago when Chrysler did the engine plant expansion, there was talk about essentially blocking off Van Horn, and if I remember correctly, when asked about it, Trenton really didn't care that we would have had to drive down to Gibraltar Road or the next road down. That really wasn't any of their concern about any inconvenience to us. Thank God, Chrysler decided to make the project a bit smaller, and Van Horn wasn't blocked off. But we have to be out there promoting ourselves in what's in our best interest, not in what, let's just say, Trenton's best interest is, because we're the ones that will ultimately be affected by this impact. And I joke with Kyle about the Chinese junks. I'm getting a little off track, but at one time, Westcroft Gardens, the owners had 2 Chinese junks out there. That was. I laugh about it. I mean, and whatever happened to the junks? Denise gave me kind of a history on it. Jimmy Holden used to run tours up and down the Detroit River over from Elizabeth Park. That was, Detroit waterfront in our area was beautiful. It was thriving. There was a lot happening. To see that, to lose that because of an intermodal shipping port it's just hard to accept. And we need to do everything we possibly can to convince our neighbors it's not in any of our best interest, because we will all lose. Every community in the downriver area will lose.
Mr. Supervisor, I do have one question,
Yes.
if I may, of Mr. Carmazon or Mr. DeBose. We've been spending a lot of time talking about the old McLouth property. Does anybody have any information as to what's going to go on with the Detroit Edison property when that is closed, the Trenton Power Plant?
Through the Grosse Ile Civic Association, and Bill Heil, Craig Pilkington, and we've been meeting with the Trenton Visionaries and Stakeholder Citizen Group, very much like our group. It's just citizens that are coming together to take a look at what's going on in their community, come up with ideas from a grassroots perspective. And I will say that we've been having meetings on McLouth now for probably past 9 months. And I think it's important for everybody on the board to understand, not all citizens of Trenton support what has been proposed by the current owner of McLouth. In fact, the proposed rezoning from mixed use to industrial generated over 70 letters to the Trenton Planning Commission and Trenton City Council in opposition of rezoning. So don't be don't believe that there's no opposition over in Trenton and Riverview. There is. There's a lot, and it's growing. So that's number one. When you're talking about not wanting to offend Trenton, keep in mind that there's a lot of dynamic here that you might not be aware of that is maybe going to be more light will be shed on that soon. But now getting to your question about the DTE facility, the Trenton Visionaries Group has been working on that too with Trenton, and the city of Trenton has been looking into that. And my understanding is that it's still in a very early stage of discussion. But I think you do potentially have some of the same concerns that you've got in McLouth about the reuse of that facility too, because obviously that's going. If we're talking about a port-type facility down there, we have to consider that impact down there, and on the county bridge, and also on the sediment in the river. That's again, I don't want to get too far into the details here, but there's a lot of detail that you do have to understand if you want to do the right thing for Grosse Ile and also Riverview and Trenton. And frankly, I think all three of these communities, frankly, should have come together jointly looked at the McClough project, found a way to create an authority or a nonprofit or something to put that property into public ownership and figure out all the environmental problems first, then think about cleanup and finding a partner, private partner to develop it. That's the way these kinds of projects have been done in other parts of the country very successfully, and there are plenty of models out there. I mean, anyone who says this project cannot be cleaned up to a mixed-use standard, I ask you, show me the study. Show me where those cost estimates are. My understanding is it's not been done. No one has also studied the difference in terms of what does it mean to clean this site up to an industrial level and leave pollution on the site, okay? And what risk does that cause to humans, wildlife, and the river? Okay, that hasn't been done either. And the Trenton Planning Commission is being put in a position of being asked to rezone that property and define how that property is to be cleaned up without the knowledge of what that impact would be to the community. And I think it's very disappointing that the way this whole project has been handled. And I will place the blame squarely on Wayne County as the way this thing went down, because I don't blame Trenton, and I don't blame Riverview, and I don't blame Grosse Ile for it. I'll be clear about that. This is Wayne County's fault that we're in this dilemma right now. It could have been handled much differently, and they chose to do it this way. And why they chose to do it this way, well, one can only speculate, and maybe we'll know the answer to that someday.
Thank you, Mr. Carmers. Any other comments from the board? We have work to do. We're going to, I got one announcement to make on the same subject. The EPA has announced they're going to be holding their community interviews. It's a community involvement program on Superfund and the doings at the McClough site. So let's see, dates. Representatives from the federal agency will be the Trenton Veterans Memorial Library, where it is on Westfield and West Road, March 25th. Pardon?
Next to the library.
Next to the library. In the library.
In the library.
March 25th through 27th and April 9th through 11th. They're setting up 30-minute interviews. And you need a reservation. So we'll get this on the website and on Connect, we'll give you the number of Meg Musa, who's handling it, 440-688-4006. We'll get that on the site. So if you want to come in and make your thoughts known, that is your opportunity to, again, comment to the EPA. Sir, yes. Sure.
Greg was making comment about, in a way, the way the procedures have unfolded on what's going on with McClough. And if you have opportunity to look at the way procedures are specified by the EPA or how they have unfolded with other sites developing across the country, the general, and this is my layman's language describing this, but the basic thought is we have this parcel. Let's make sure that everything is resolved and in order before we put somebody on that property to do something. That did not happen here. And this is loaded with, the devil is always in the details, but this particular circumstance has some real issues that cause concern. Take, for example, the fact that we allow somebody to build an infrastructure on that property. It's going to be cleaned up by the Superfund when? When they get the money, and what's going to happen? We have this deferred period of time. If you come back and try to test or dig or move things, you're going to be violating that infrastructure. Those people who own that business might be very unhappy about that and drag, they've already been in lawsuits with the EPA. They're going to say you're interrupting our business. I know this is conjecture, but it seems like a realistic thing. It hasn't been thought through is the point I'm trying to illustrate. I don't want to dwell on conjecture. There's things here that have just give this thing a difficult way to go. I just wanted to add that thought to it.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Last comments? Work on our community concerns. Get those known to the Trenton Planning Commission. Probably be there. Look at decide if a resolution is the way to go, or tweak this one. A little work to do. Actually, a lot. Okay, Mr. Budney.
I would make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Okay, seconded by the treasurer. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. We'll make that at 10:25. Thank everyone for coming tonight. Covered a lot of territory.